All right, here we are. We're back. I'm professional. I'm trying to professional it up for Anselman. He saw me in a button-up shirt the other day and thought that was good, but then thought I should also have a tie. So here it is. This does not work with a tie at all because it's a linen shirt that my wife hates that I got at consignment. So I'm not going to do this. But I do know how to tie a tie. Look at that. And pop the collar, not. But she doesn't like the shirt, so now it's a work shirt. I use it for a work shirt. You get it. You get it. Quoting Whitesnake. All right. The idea for this stream was it's prompted from a few things. It's prompted from thinking about online community, thinking about community, thinking about so yesterday during my live stream, good thing I'm married. I don't know what that means. During the live stream yesterday, Lucas Voss, or is it Lucas Van Oss? Maybe he just succinctly closes it up. So anyhow, Aaron and Lucas, and then their dad, who I forget their name, they're this just fantastic little Dutch family. I was telling Job or Job, if you're CW Weeks, that there's too many Dutch people that I like. I'm gonna have to go visit the Netherlands at some point. And I appreciate the Dutch. And this all started with Paul Vanderklay. So, who knows? But so I was talking to him, and I think it's gonna be out Sunday. I think I saw he tagged me on X, and in that conversation, I really like the conversation. He's a great conversationalist, which is why I reached out to him. I saw him on Christian Baxter, and I was just like, holy cow, this guy's a stud. I need to talk to him. So he reached out to me, and we made it happen. So, but he asked me, one of the questions he asked me during the conversation was, I think it was just like, what are you good at? Which is an awkward question. I don't know. And it's part of I don't know what it is. It makes me go very self-analytical, and I don't like that. It makes me look at myself in ways that I don't find comfortable. Part of it's that Midwestern, it's not even Midwestern. There's an American thing. Conan O'Brien is like this. He's very self-effacing, he's not very, pokes fun at himself all the time. People don't really like to talk about what they're good at. And honestly, I don't know what that is, but what I said to him, part of that's POS theology stuff, prideful humbleness. There's something, yes, proud humbleness, humble brag. I'm so humble. I don't like being proud. And I don't think there's a false humility in that. I love the term false humility. It's like Kanye. It's one of the things I love about Kanye. That dude is not falsely humble. He just thinks he's the greatest, which part of me loves that, it's not thinking less of yourself. It's that C.S. Lewis quote that I love. It's not thinking less of yourself. It's thinking of yourself less, which I definitely don't do. But then also Chad was speaking to Anna the other day, I think Anna K or something, another alcoholic. And they brought up some common AA term, which is something so similar to stuff that I've said about myself, which is simultaneously thinking you're God's gift to the world and the worst thing that's ever happened. False pride is funner. Yeah. Self-deprecating humor. That's what I was thinking with Conan. Not self-effacing, but same, whatever, relatable. Anyhow, he asked me what I was good at. And I said, I don't know. I feel like I'm moderately decent at a lot of things and an expert at none, which is, Jordan Peterson said you shouldn't do that. You should specialize. However, I should find that. There's a great quote from Specialization is for Insects. What is that? Yeah, it just pops up. Let's share it. Here we go. What is the quote? Yeah, here it is. Just give it to me. So a good friend that I met at one of the phases of my life used to love this quote, and I can't remember what it's from. It's from Heiling's character Loris Long in the novel Time Enough for Love provides a list of requirements for a competent man. So he says a human being should be able to change a diaper, plan an invasion, butcher a hog, con a ship, design a building, write a sonnet, balance accounts, build a wall, set a bone, comfort the dying, take orders, give orders, cooperate, act alone, solve equations, analyze a new problem, pitch manure, program a computer, cook a tasty meal, fight efficiently, die gallantly. Specialization is for insects. And to some degree, that's true. It's also relatable in that I've heard Rogan talk about, I don't know what it's from, but it's like the code of the samurai. Like in order to be a samurai, you also have to be able to host a tea ceremony and write calligraphy. I think because it's this idea of balance. Like they would argue essentially you can't be good at you can be good. You can be a good fighter, a good samurai if you're not balanced, if you're not good at other things, if you're not somewhat poetic. It's kind of how like to be music and math or something work together. I don't know. Specialization is for insects. That's what I thought of. But I'm good at circling back, circumambulating. Notes from a Tilt-A-Whirl. It's a great book. Read it. I'm decent at a lot of things because I'm inclined very artistically, very creatively, very linguistically, language centric, I think. Uh, Wordplay, comedy, philosophy, like I like to think about all that stuff, but I'm capable, and but I was raised by a carpenter rancher in western South Dakota to very conservative, grounded parents in a very rural place. And so my whole upbringing and uh, initiation and catechesis for most of my life until becoming an adult was not any of this. And so it's, I'm decent at a number of things, but not great at any of them. So but I think what I'm really passionate about, and it's related to this, we're getting into online community, and what I love is community. Another thing we talked about in that Lucas Voss conversation was he asked me about my big five, and I'm like 98th percentile enthusiasm or an extroversion. It's either that 98th percentile enthusiasm, maybe 96th enthusiasm. It's a subcategory, but my extroversion is 96, I think, or something like that. Very extroverted. Although that changes when you get older. I'm a little less extroverted now, and I'm very open to experience, like 98th percentile openness. So when you combine those things, I was talking to Chad this morning, you kind of got to put some guardrails up for yourself, because I will just, in pursuing communion and relationship and people, I will run myself haggard, like I'll run myself to death like a horse, that you just ride until they just die mid-stride. Their heart explodes. I'm good at talking to the camera alone. But the thing is I never, I don't know. It's kind of like when I'm alone, I'm never alone. I don't ever think of myself as alone. That's kind of my pray without ceasing, even talking to God. I really do feel like this isn't just like some bullshit thing. I really feel like I'm always communing with people. And even with this, like I feel like I'm talking, since we are surrounded by so great a cloud of witnesses. I've always felt that in my life. It's even like the iconography of the saints or whatever. And that's why I said to Lucas, because he asked about my deconstruction, and I said I've never really deconstructed or lost faith. And I think part of that is because I was a born mystic. What's the topic? I'm getting there. So what am I good at? I think community building. I'm like Barack Obama. And for all of my life, even back to churches with small groups and things, I didn't. I hadn't had a lot of experience growing up with genuine religious community. I mean, I grew up. I'm thinking of Christian Baxter talking about a small town. I grew up in such a small town that we had a pretty decent community, but uh, it's just the medium. When you grow up in a small town, you just know everyone, and they know you to some degree. And like a really small town. My hometown I don't know, had like 1,000 people. And I grew up in the country of that. So there were like some surrounding country towns that all came to that center place for school, because I grew up in a generation where country schools stopped. Where I grew up used to have country schools. My dad grew up going to like a little country school. You think like really old American settlement type schools. They were like the first schools that existed before modern public schools, local community schools, which I'm guessing the education was better. That's a different topic. And so we had a little community there, but then I started going to churches as an adult when I was married that were really small group centric. I went to Sovereign Grace churches. And so Sovereign Grace was I don't know, it was a weird thing. It emerged out of this. A lot of the people who founded Sovereign Grace Ministries, it wasn't a denomination at one point, now it is. It wasn't when I was initially in it. I joined Sovereign Grace after it was Sovereign Grace, before it was People of Destiny International, which sounds like a cult. But it's before it was a denomination. So they called themselves an affiliation or a family of churches. And a lot of them came out of the Assemblies of God stuff. So I know there's a lot of people in this community that come out of charismatic backgrounds and Assembly of God things. So these were very Assembly of God's people. But it was people who grew up in Assemblies of God who are charismatic, who then, morning, pumpkin. Talk to you in a little bit. I'm doing a recording. I have many pet names for my kids. Pumpkin is one of them. And so I'm thinking about my child. So now I'm coming back to you. So Sovereign Grace, they were all charismatic, but then they became convinced of Reformed theology, particularly in regards to soteriology. So they said doctrines. They always called it like doctrines of the cross. And so Calvinist convictions like tulip around atonement, those sorts of things. So they are like charismatic, Reformed, Baptists. So they were a weird mixture, a unique mixture. It's I don't know, that kind of thing is more common now, but it definitely wasn't at the time. But they were big on small groups. Like small groups was the way you do church, house churches. They would say like you have a Sunday gathering, but the main place you do church is house churches. And so they had house church leaders that they trained. I mean, those were essentially the deacons of the church, and kind of deacon pastor types, really, if you think about it. And it was cool. I loved it. It was we were in our mid late 20s while we were there, young kids. It was just fantastic. Not as many life commitments, a lot more time, a lot more energy. We would just have small groups for like 4 or 5 hours to the middle of the night. We would take our kids with us. We would like put them to sleep at the house church in like some back room, or they would just mill about while we were having house church. And it was fantastic, but it was great community, because that's part of it. I heard Tim Keller say once, there is no quality time without quantity of time. And I don't know, that's probably true and not true, but it's definitely like where you put your attention and your time and where you place yourself is where you're going to find value. It's kind of connected to the Lewis idea of like, which Tripp shared with me the other day, but it's a common Lewis line of like, don't seek to love someone, just act like you love someone, and you'll start to love them. Because what you do is, it's like what Richard Rohr, look at this, I'm all over the place. How long between a Tim Keller quote and a C.S. Lewis quote can I bring in Richard Rohr? Richard Rohr says, you don't, and Lance loves this one, you don't think your way into a new way of action, you act your way into a new way of thinking, much more so. Which is it's good advice for people that are captured by propositional tyranny. Anyhow, within those communities, we had a great time. It was fantastic. And Even the elders of the church, the small group that we were in was so vibrant and healthy, it like would split a few times because it get too big, and then it would split, and then it would split, and that happened a few times. And they kept wanting to. What they wanted to do was like they saw this big bonfire of vibrant community, and then what they want to do was splinter that off and start little fires that then would grow into big fires again and have this splintering fractal effect. What ended up happening is the fire died, in most of the things. And why? Is it because it broke up? Is it because the groups got separated? The people were different? Is it because changes in life? Who knows? It's kind of like capturing the spirit. And it's related to all this. That's another thing we talked about in the Lucas Voss conversation. Is I gave a brief history, which I mentioned Tayo. Tayo gave a really good one in some live stream the other day of TLC and when everything happened, because I was trying to explain to him that TLC, I think, is a legitimate body, and it's not an institution. It's not based in language. It's very relational. And so being a legitimate body, though, it's dependent on a spirit, an animating spirit, and the spirit moves where it will and where it wills. And so the spirit of TLC, in my evaluation and in my experience, has moved around throughout all these different mediums. So we're getting into the online community. Medium is the message thing. TLC started on YouTube with Paul Vanderklay. TLC is a Paul Vanderklay thing. Peugeot's adjacent, Vervaeke's adjacent, JBP is maybe the catalyst, but it's centered around PBK because that's the relationships and the randos. So it started there, and then it was always YouTube. We started to reach out to Paul via email, different electronic medium, talking to him. And then we wanted to have conversations, so we started having conversations. We were doing Zoom, but Zoom is like a record thing. It's not and then Discord happened. So it was all YouTube right away. And there's always been an ongoing part of TLC that's in YouTube. But then Discord happened, and Discord was the new hot girl medium technology for TLC for a while, for a year or two. I don't know. I can't remember. Kind of all during COVID, it was Discord. And Discord's interesting because it has text. It evolved audio, voice memos, but that is after I stopped using it, really. It was really the voice chats and the video chats, which became kind of the heart, where the spirit was of TLC for a long time. And I don't know. Discord is cool in that way, is that it's very ephemeral. It's kind of like live streams, because there's something that happens in a live stream that is ephemeral. Like if you're not in the live stream, if you're not in the chat, you can watch the video later, but you watch the video alone. You're virtually alone instead of virtually not alone, which the live chat has. And you can't interact with people. You can maybe interact in the comments, but it's a different thing. It's a different texture of the spirit, and different things happen. So like in Discord, in the voice chats, it was so ephemeral. There's no recording. You're either there or you're not. Sometimes they would just pop off, and like all of a sudden there'd just be 20, 30 people in a voice chat, different people talking, different people working through things. There'd be all these video chats, I would just be cooking meals while in Discord. And like that was the hotspot for a long time. And now largely Discord is not where the spirit is. I mean, it's largely dead. People don't really use it. People that are older in the corner find Discord to be weird and cumbersome and hard to learn, and it is. So like the spirit moved, and then for a long time, my center of community moved away from Discord, and YouTube was always there. YouTube's always kind of running in the background and involved. And then I started this Voxer group. We had a private chat in Discord with a bunch of my inner ring, Lewis's inner ring of people that I was closest with and that I had relationship with. And then I started this Voxer group because my friend Preston Sprinkle, who I've lost contact with, liked to use this Voxer app, which is like this weird app, walkie-talkie. Kind of sucks. It's not that great. But that was where the group was forever. And then it kind of got too big, where there was a core group of people and it was cool. And I would do basically what I do on live streams in Voxer. I would just watch YouTube videos, have thoughts, and I would just send out audio messages of voice memos of, I don't know, stuff I was thinking about. And that would pop off conversation. And and Boxer was really for me and for a core group of people, like, I don't know who was all in there. Jess, Nate, Sherry. I don't even have Boxer on my phone anymore. Michael Lady, a lot of the Grail Country folks were in there. Julian, it evolved. There were like different people. My friend Sarah, Sam eventually got in there. So there were, I don't know, a lot of different people. Chad is in there eventually when Chad showed up. But then it eventually got too big where it becomes overwhelming. Okay, this is all part of the mosaic. Keep up with me. Or track. It'll all come together. Just let it flow over you. And then Voxer got too big, and then there were people I didn't really know that I didn't have relationship with that came in that started kind of like being the bulk of the content in there, and I'm just like, I don't, and it just became something where, because of my embodied life, because of my kids, because of my commitments in my in the fullness of my physical life in Minneapolis, I couldn't do it. It was too consuming. It stopped the technology. It's kind of like that John Bayer article about the structure of the church. The structure and the hierarchy of the church post Constantine was always meant to serve the well-being of the essence of the church, the spirit of the church. And when it stops serving the essence of the church, it needs to die. Technology is this, any technology, any tool is the same way. Techne, in the most fundamental sense, is the same way. If it serves the essence of the church and is bearing fruit, fantastic. If it doesn't, get rid of it. And that's a discernment thing for every person who's involved with it. So Voxer stopped serving me. It stopped being life-giving. It was a life-draining thing for me. And so I had to walk away from it. So look at all these Minnesota folks. Rochester! So I moved away from that. And then I started this Signal group. And this isn't like, I'm not just like, I don't know. I preferred Signal. We tried to just move everything over to Signal for a long time because Signal's a better app. It's better designed. It has better encryption. The audio quality is way better. You can do video. You can do text. It's a lot of things. And so we moved over to Signal, and now I have a bunch of different Signal chats. But even that, like, I stopped doing really big chat groups because it becomes overwhelming. So then I had smaller groups, and then it was just one-to-one, and now it's almost like I just have phone calls with people. I'm reverting in my technological usage. It's almost like that's the best way almost to get a hold of me. And it's almost preferential because it has that ephemeral quality. It's one-on-one. It's highly personal. It's highly relational. And I like it. Sometimes people just call me. Chad just calls me randomly, and I love that. I said, Chad, thanks for continually calling me, because I don't always pick up because I have a very full life and it's busy, but when I can, I do. And that's great. That's fantastic. I love talking to people on the phone. Dude, what's up? Miss you too. Yeah. Moral of the story. Luke is the fire. Well, I'm not. Yeah. So Jess, I'm kind of saying that. I think back to the Lucas Voss thing somewhat. I think that is for lack of a better word, gifting, whatever. It's like enthusiasm, assertiveness, passion, ideas, this kind of thing. Like I'm very passionate. And so wherever I tend to draw a community wherever I am, and whether or not it's good community or whether or not it's resonant with you, I don't know. I mean, you're the judge of that. The person is the nexus and the locus of all meaning. So you have to discern that for yourself, I guess. But yeah, Voxer kind of died, and then Signal chats kind of come and go. But and then all of a sudden, like Jacob came into the TLC community, started doing the just chattings, and then I don't know why I started doing these live streams. I don't know why. I don't even know why I started, like when I started doing them. But I just had the idea one day. It's like, I want to do a live stream. I think it's cool and basically what I do here is the exact same thing that I would do on Boxer. It's a little longer. It's a video, and like there's a chat on the side. So it's a different medium. It has a different texture, a different feel, this technology. But it's cool and I like it. And it seems to work. It seems to be okay. Relatively popular. Popularity shouldn't be like your unilateral, your like primary metric of discerning value and quality, but it's something. It's telling you something, like my kids will just be like, Taylor Swift, she's so popular. Like, well, does that mean she's good? I think with Taylor Swift, she's both. She is good. She is talented. There's actual artistry there, but she's also very popular. But all pop culture is not, it's like beauty is fleeting. Popularity is generally fleeting. That's why I like classics, even with literature. This is something I tell my kids, or even movies. When we talk about family movie night, I don't want to just watch whatever drivel is on Netflix, because I have, like, it might be great, but you know how I know when something is really great? When it's a classic, when it's stood the test of time, when it's weathered multiple generations, multiple cultural contexts, and people still find value in it and people keep revisiting it. That's telling you something. That's the democracy. It's like Chesterton's quote about tradition, which is, it's the democracy of the dead. Tradition is showing you value outside of your current cultural temporal moment. All right. So that's all like context. And so what I'm thinking is, when it relates to mediums and technology, so like even Twitter now, I got on Twitter for prolificity, but it's overwhelming to me. And then all of a sudden I have like 80 notifications or whatever, which probably isn't even that much for people that are active on Twitter, of all these people liking comments and doing things. And I'm thinking, for my life right now, Chad and I were talking about this morning. What I even do on YouTube, and what I watch on YouTube, and the live streams that I do, and the TLC content that I try to keep up with, which you can't really, you have to pick and choose because you can't do everything. It's the blessing and the curse of living an embodied incarnate life. Is that there needs to be specificity and particularity there, boundaries, borders. You can't do everything everywhere all at once, right? You can't do that yourself. And so what I feel like is, I feel a strong, I was already on Twitter once and I deleted my account and stopped it. I can't even remember what my account name was before, and it's all gone. Sometimes I wish I had access to some of my tweets from back in the day, because they're, because I don't know, who knows what I said. I remember some of them, like, you can't reason with a rationalist that rationalism is irrational. That was a tweet I had back in the day that used to fire people up. And this is back when I was in the evangelical church, and this would trigger, that's my worst church story that I tell about. Like, this guy in my church, all my tweets would just be like, you're a heretic, and I'm talking to you to take up your bandwidth so you don't spread your heresy to other people, which, that's my bad church experience in a nutshell. So I feel like it's just not wise for me to participate. I don't know how people do it. How do people how are people active on YouTube? Like Christian Baxter, for example. This dude, I know he does. He's like actively cultivating his YouTube stuff, and he's on Twitter. Or like Pete from Strange Theology, or even PVK. I don't know how they are in all these different mediums, and in private voice chats and messaging chats, and messaging themselves and phone calls, and then their own embodied life. How can you do all that and stay sane? I don't even know how it's possible, because I'm 98th percentile extroversion. I have a huge capacity and energy for engaging with people in multiple contexts. And what I do can feel overwhelming at times. I don't know how people are doing more than me. It's unfathomable to me. So that gets into my title, and then I'll open this up, is like the ring of power. I was thinking about the ring of power. Do we need one medium to rule them all? It's kind of like a password manager when you have all these different passwords online for all these different websites. Well, what if you could just consolidate that all into one thing, so you didn't have to remember all your passwords? Or what if you could just have one technological medium that just consolidated everything and brought it all together, where you didn't have to mentally splinter yourself out into all these different places to try to track it all? Just consolidate it all. But the problem with that is, then it's like with anything, it becomes a monoculture, and you lose the diversity of the many. And so it's the myth. It's the illusion. It's the lie that you don't have to pick and choose, that you can have it all, that you don't have to actually incarnate and live a particular instantiated life, that you don't have to select, that you can just live it all, FOMO, do it all. You can't. You have to choose. And I suppose where I'm always going to choose, if I'm choosing a medium, because of the history of the TLC, I'm going to choose YouTube. I'm going to choose live streams. I'm going to choose PVK. I'm going to stick with him, even though, like he said the other day, he's like, Luke's too busy. He doesn't comment on my videos as much anymore. But like, that's going to happen. How could it, it's just the nature of the beast. You can't, as you evolve and change as a person, your attention is going to shift and change. And that's fine. That's good. That's necessary. So, I don't know that we can have a ring of power technological medium that unifies everything. That's probably a little bit of the illusion, the Babel kind of illusion, which is Babel's the opposite of Pentecost, right? There you go. How do we have a technological Pentecost and not a technological Babel? Because that's the book I was going to write way before TLC ever existed, Technological Babel. How do we have a technological Pentecost where everybody's speaking their own unique language, their own particular instantiated language, the God of their own understanding, their own history, their own relationships, their own patterns, but everybody else understands it? That's iconic thinking. Iconic thinking is that, where everybody is speaking their own particular language, but everybody simultaneously understands, rather than one technological, systematic, consolidated technology of power to rule them all, which promises to give communion and communication, but actually is the dissolution of it, and it is the disintegration of it, and is confusion and flood and chaos. And somebody was asking me the other day what my favorite Lord of, or kind of Tolkien, Middle Earth, Silmarillion character is, and it's probably Tom Bombadil, because Tom Bombadil was next, or way more so than Frodo and the Hobbits. Tom Bombadil was immune to the Ring of Power. Like, he didn't care about it at all. Like, that's one of my favorite scenes. I think it's in The Hobbit. I was trying to remember. I haven't read the books in a while, and it's not in the films. But Tom Bombadil, when he's exposed to the Ring of Power, I think it must be with Bilbo. He like looks at it, and he does like this magic trick where it disappears, and then Bilbo is like freaking out because he's already kind of attached to the Ring of Power. And then I think Tom Bombadil flips it in the air and it comes back, and then he just hands it back to him because he doesn't care about it, which like not even Gandalf, not even Galadriel do. Like, they're terrified of touching the ring, right? Out of wisdom. But Tom Bombadil is like, I don't know, in a Christian framework, essentially he's a Christ. Are you? Sorry, I had to I had to engage a child, a chitlin. So Tom Bombadil is he's like he's a saint. He's a bodhisattva. He's a whatever. He's in whatever tradition you're in. He's the kind of person who's impervious to the deception of power. There you go. He doesn't care about power. That's the authority power distinction. Power is zero sum. It's either or. It's binary. It's against. It's power over, versus Philippians 2, which is true authority, which is true hierarchy, which is the higher serves the lower, which is symbiotic. It's synergistic. It's completely voluntary. It is authority is woo. Like, you don't have to convince someone to submit to true authority. They just do. Submission and obedience is one in proper authority. And Bombadil couldn't care less about power, which is why the ring had no power over him. He didn't care about it. He didn't value it. He didn't need it. It was nothing. Oh man, I was gonna bring in the Orthodoxy piece, and Orthodoxy's in the title, so that'll get us clicks. Because it's amazing. All my live streams that talk about Orthodoxy have the most views. Sorry, Chad. It's just whatever. But so it is dude. You're gonna if you're awake over there in Aussie land, you're gonna have to come in here and give some of your genius, because you're a seer, dude. Charlie is a seer, and he's a wordsmith because he's a poet. So, what was I gonna say? How all this relates to Orthodoxy. So I was listening to Graham Pardon's conversation with Christian Baxter, because he's a local guy who I'm trying to build some community and connections with, because that was another question that Lucas said is, this community thing, because I was talking about the online context of it, of community building, and he's like, do you do that like in your embodied life? And I was like, man, I try to, but and I have in my past, but we live in this weird time of bowling alone and COVID and the disintegration of institution and communion and plugging into this technology. Like a lot of where you meet people now is online. Like even my kids now and my son, and he's talking about, because he doesn't use social media, has a phone now, but he's like, that's where everybody's hanging out. It's on social media. It's on what the hell, Snapchat and TikTok and whatever. And so, like, even with girls, if you're like interested in a girl, he's like, you can't just text them or call them or walk up to them. You have to, like, it's like the slow move in. You have to contact them on Snapchat or something. I'm like, what's happening? What kind of world do we live in? I'm an old man now. So I don't know. And I'm trying to process what all this means for Orthodoxy, and Graham is further into this journey than me. He's been actively practicing it for, I don't know, 13, 14, 15 years. And he has, I don't know, thoughts and concerns. And I value his opinion. I think he's got some wisdom. I like the guy. And so I want to be talking to him about that, because here's the thing. I'm an all or nothing person. I'm in the Orthodox Church now. I've kind of united. I've tethered myself. I've anchored myself to that ship. So like, if it's going to sink, I guess I'm kind of that way. I'm like the old school captain. If the ship's going down, I'm going down with it, I guess. Or if it's going up, I'm going up with it. My Protestantism continues and has ended in the Orthodox Church. And that's what I'm choosing. Because you have to make choices in this life. This is where I'm not that kind of wooey nothingness. I said the term Gnostic, even though I'm just trying. I'm grasping at straws. I don't know what the proper term is. Kind of perennialism, where it's just like everything is the same. Well, it is and it isn't. That doesn't mean that you don't have to choose a practice and a tradition. You do. That's what I'm talking about. You have to live an embodied life. And so, I'm not saying I'm the captain of Orthodoxy, dude. But funny, you're a funny person. So I don't know. Those are all my thoughts. I'm going to put out the invite. I'm going to look at comments, see what people have to say. That's what I got for you. 40 minutes. I'm getting more long-winded. Okay, let's see. Did you see my tie, Anselman? That was for you. Also, MJ, when and if you listen to this, and I said you often don't understand me, and I want to have a living conversation with you. What up, dog?
Hey, dude.
One of your big criticisms, MJ, of TLC and of me and everyone else is that we don't listen to our critics. Are you kidding me? The only people I don't ever talk about people that agree with me. I just talk about you. I talk about Anselman. All I talk about is criticize me. So I don't know what you're talking about.
Oh.
Holy cow.
Hello.
People coming in hot. What are we doing? Oh, man. Fun times. Woo. Hey, guys.
What up, y'all? What up, y'all?
Oh, okay. Nobody came in and was chatting and knowing what to talk. Hey, babe, just find some breakfast and then do your things. My daughter just over here listening to me, just staring at me, and I'm just like, do you need something with me? She's just listening. This is how she can be present with me. Is that when I'm in TLC land, she just listens on the side. Daddy, will you look at me for a second, please?
It's better than like
Hey.
a football game plan or something, you know?
I don't know. Maybe this is the modern version of that because I
Yeah.
actually I stopped. Oh, somebody has YouTube going in the background.
There we go.
Okay, someone, but I actually enjoy that. I think somebody still has it going. I don't know what's happening. There, I don't hear an echo. But the kind of culture I used to despair.
Charlie, I think your mic is making some background noise. You might just want to, there you go.
I'll just mute him for now. So yeah, it's not. So the kind of sports culture, I grew up in such a heavy sports culture. My dad is like sports. He was big into wrestling because wrestling didn't start at his school until after he graduated. But he played basketball, football, all that stuff. I came from like an insane wrestling town. So it was so sports centric that then my solution was to just de-emphasize sports. But then circling back around in the death and rebirth spiral that is life, the further up and further in, I'm like, there's a lot of beauty and value in sports. Like even the culture of going to football games or watching football, and then you can just you don't like it's a space to just be present with your kids. Like watching a basketball game with my son is fantastic. Like it's a beautiful thing. Like it doesn't have to be bad, anyhow. My daughter just went.
That Protestant impulse to like that we're making idols out of everything. We got to get rid of all the idols.
Yeah.
The idol factory.
Get rid of sports. Oh wait, God is in sports. Weird. It's like he's in
School
everything.
spirit.
Yeah.
I want to be a little bit contrarian. I'm totally with you, but I heard something yesterday which is directly relevant. I was listening to a new talk that was published where Steiner was talking about eurythmy, which is a whole thing that I'm not going to try and explain right now. But speaking about the medium, it's kind of relevant to that, like the medium of in-person body language, etc. But he was talking about sports, and he said that sports are he said that eurythmy is the opposite of materialistic sports, and his reasoning was that sports again, I don't know if I'm totally with him here, but he said that sports they're all about being healthy and like promoting health, which is materialistic. Which I thought was kind of interesting, but kind of an unusual perspective. But yeah, I'm with you on that they can be good as well. But yeah, I think probably listening to you talk to TLC friends is probably better than sports, though.
No, it's
I
not.
don't know. Yeah,
No,
go ahead. Tayo, speak.
Oh no, I was just being contrarian to Jonathan's contrarian. But no, I don't think this is better than sports.
Why not?
I love it.
This is not embodied.
Well, no, I'm talking about like watching the football game, though.
Yeah.
Well,
Watching
this is I would say that like where you can see my body moving around just like you can see the sports people's body moving around on the TV.
No, I would say watching sports on TV by yourself is less than going to the bar to watch a sport with friends. That's what I mean by embodied.
You're pissing off Nate. You come after football, man. He's gonna get you.
Hey, man, I'm just quoting Sonny. I'm not saying. I can appreciate sports. I don't know. As somebody who, my dad was always watching football games, and I have lots of love for my dad, but I can't tell you how many times I walked by him because it's just not, it's like, this is not what I want to do. So maybe it's somewhat personal as well. But also, it's just like you have to deal with the fucking advertisements. Holy shit, I hate advertisements.
Oh, yeah. Do you know what? American sports, for that one reason, yes, terrible perspective to watch on TV.
Yep.
Well, there's something about like soccer, legit like global football. I mean, there's something. There's a spirit there that has. I mean, it's powerful.
For sure.
Man, it's powerful.
Yeah, it is. but I didn't really come here to talk about sport because
This stream is brought to you by
I can talk
Rain.
about that all day. I wanted to jump in on we'll ask more questions about what you were letting down. I really enjoyed your.
So good.
There
Say
we
that
go.
again. What's
There we
happening?
go. I was just waiting for Chad's burp to come. Yeah. I really enjoyed the way you laid out the chronological, your participation through different mediums in TLC,
Okay.
and your conclusion was that YouTube is your favorite to participate on. Correct?
Yeah, I mean, it's just what I'm gonna choose because of the history of it, and because it's what I prefer and like the most, and because I can't do it all, you know. So also a quick note: there's someone is trying to enter, but the studio is full with 10 people.
Oh, no.
So just FYI for people to be aware.
Yeah.
I'll head out after just saying this because it is
Okay.
midnight. But I've found an Orthodox church and been baptized into that in
Hear
Australia.
that, Chad? Orthodoxy.
One of us, and my wife made it turn into my wedding as well. So
Oh, dude,
it was wonderful.
And it's cool.
There is a community sort of building. There's like the spirit of it, and maybe because I haven't been in a church before, and I've never seen sort of a community foster around worship before.
yeah.
It might be something that's novel to it, but there's something about looking at the same thing is what makes the community. And it's very easy in this little corner to not look at the same thing. And there have been times that I've seen it work. And I think this is why I always go back to YouTube, is because this is the thing that hasn't changed, in the sense that, like, it is, like, I remember a historian said, like, the internet is digital stone. Like, you come to it. It's not like a rushing river. It's not like a live stream. It's not something you catch or it's gone. There's no rush. It's your engagement. It's your relationship. You get to pay attention to it. But also, because of that, you have to actually really focus, because nothing's moving. Nothing's actually going to, grab your attention. You actually have to focus now. You have to find that point. And like, there are some times, where we all sort of kind of knew what the thing to pay attention to was. Like Sam Harris, Jordan Peterson, one easy thing that I remember. Like, I knew, even not talking about it online, I was like, this is something that we're all paying attention to. In the Grail Country, or I think it was Rando's, the piece of shit theology video, hands down one of the most important videos ever. Great work, Luke and Jerry and Nate and all that. But I think it's really interesting because there's this push and pull of the fact of, like, once you're in something, like right now, like how I'm in this, and I'm participating and talking, it feels fluid, it feels dynamic. And if I pay too much attention to the fact that it is fleeting and is going to die, then I'm out. I'm not engaged, and I can't participate because I can't. It's like paying attention to a group chat that happens while I'm asleep. And then, but at the end, at the same time, that's life. Life is always changing, and it's always around us. It's just that simple thing that I've seen of, like, we all come to the same purpose. We all come to the same point of attention. It is what it is. It'll grow and it'll shrink. I think that this little corner is easily the most wonderful thing that I get to participate in. And I would say, Luke, would you say I poke my head in once every year? Like,
You don't pop onto live streams a lot, but it's one of those. You were more involved in some like Voxer for a while and things like that. But you're always. It's great to see you
Yeah.
because
Oh
it
yeah.
has been a while, but like you're always there, dude. Whatever wavelength I'm on, you're on a close one. So it's
Yeah,
all good.
100%. And I think there's something about there's something that about that intuition of sort of like, what are we trying to look at, what are we paying attention to, all of that type of stuff, that we go, oh, like, this is what we need to this is what we need to do, this is what we need to pay attention to. And it's, to me, like, the reason there's many ways that I try to talk about orthodoxy, but to me, orthodoxy is a world built on two poles, and one pole is the Jesus prayer, and the other pole is theosis. Because you have to ask for mercy because of who you are and where you are and all of this stuff, but you can't just be asking for mercy. You also have to know that the goal is to become a saint. So you're running back and forth between these two moments, and that's sort of how the world sort of manifests itself. Obviously, it's just an illustration, but it's one of those things where it's just like, we're doing the right thing, and I think that's actually like the most important part of this little corner. Anyway, I gotta go. I'm gonna sign out. I'll keep listening. I love you all.
Thanks, Charlie. That was fantastic. Yeah,
Bye.
I don't know if other people have other thoughts. I'm just highlighting criticisms, as is my usual thing.
I came along. I wanted to talk about the authority power split because I think I have a couple of good illustrations.
Cool.
In my company, there's the CEO. The CEO in my company is fairly new. I think he's been there for a year, maybe a year and a half. He does not know our industry. He came from manufacturing. We work in fabrication. Everyone who hires people in the executive position seems to think they're the same thing. They are diametrically opposed. Manufacturing has a basis of machines. Fabrication has a basis of persons, right? So manufacturing makes widgets. They're all the same. They love widgets. They're just, like you were talking about earlier, they're identical objects that just get cranked out, and they know down to the 10th of a second how long it takes to make one.
Yeah.
Fabrication is we're making stuff that's never been made before, never will be made again. It's one-time things that comes from a drawing and customer specifications, and ultimately at the bottom of the system is a welder, right?
Yeah. Creation, personal creation.
Right. So their output comes out in waves. But anyway, I'm going off track. I don't want to go down. Good. Anyway, so our CEO is from a manufacturing background. However, there is a woman who has worked at our company for 30 years, and she is the assistant to the CEO. So the CEO has the power. I mean, he has the authority. He's the one who signs the documents. He's the one who has to go to the meetings. He's the one who has to stand up and give the presentations. Who makes the presentations? His assistant. Who gathers the documents that he needs to sign? The assistant. Who is the one who arranges his schedule? His assistant, right? Who's the one who knows how to get things done in the company? The assistant. Who's the one who knows how to talk to the right person and put a little pressure on or put a little smile on and get the thing done that needs to be done in time that it needs to be done? The assistant. Who has the power in our company? The assistant. The assistant knows how to run the company. She has the power. She does not have the authority, but she has the power. She's all over the place, and everybody knows it, and everyone knows she runs the company. The CEO is the one who has the authority. He's the one who, his name is on the paper. He has the document. He's the one who says the things, but the authority, the assistant to him, is the one who's making it all happen. And so she's got the power. So that there's a separation there, because if he were to walk around, one, he has the reason it separates like this. And I think every company's like this. Every company I've worked for is like this. There's this separation, or most companies, like any company larger than, say, 15 people, this breaks out. And the reason it happens is that the CEO can't be calling everybody and going, hey, can you do this thing? Can you give me this? Oh, I need this. I need that. He doesn't have time, and it looks weird. Like if the CEO shows up at your desk and says, hey, could you give me a screenshot of that chart? You're going to be like, what? It just feels weird, right? He's limited by appearances. He's limited by how it looks to the people, and he's limited by the will of the people, the will of the employees, right? Like he's got to keep morale, he's got to keep goodwill, and he's got to look like a leader who's making things happen or getting things done. And if he's going around doing all these little tic-tacky things, you're going, what are you doing, dude? Shouldn't you be like strategizing, you know? So there's this separation of authority and power that happens, and it's because of appearance, right? And but everyone knows that she's the one who gets everything done, right? Like if the company were to change hands, her name's on the contract of people who have to stay for a certain amount of time, right? Not so much the CEO. They don't care. But her name's there. That's what happened the last time we got sold. She was like a key part of the negotiation because everyone knew that she was moving, right? That she was the one who made things happen. So yeah, bishops and deacons. The other one is you commented yourself. Yeah, the other one is the chess example, but not everybody plays chess, so I won't go down that road. I just thought this would be a more clear example for people who probably is something that they've experienced more.
Just use chess and either subtly or explicitly shame people for not knowing what you're doing.
I'm not a great chess player, so I can't shame anybody. I'm terrible. But it's the same in chess, right? Okay, we'll do the chess. The king moves one square at a time, but if the king gets captured, the game's over. However, you never actually kill the king. You don't capture the king. You just threaten the king and make it to the place where he can't move anymore. When he loses mobility, it's over.
And the queen's the power horse of the board.
And the queen is the power horse. She usually uses 2 bishops or she uses the 2 knights. You rarely see a game where a queen uses a bishop and a knight. It's usually she either sides with the church or sides with the military. But then she can assert influence from far away.
Yeah.
The king can only move one piece at a time, but he can't capture anybody because he can never move into check, right? Well, he can capture very few pieces, but only in weird ways.
Yeah.
You know, it's because he can only move one piece at a time or one move at a time, one square at a time. Sorry, man.
Chess is so cool. It's such a cool game because it's just like life and philosophy and theology, just like in a simple game. So great.
Well, and the whole thing works because it's asymmetrical. There's a tension, and it's because of how you place the king and the queen, right? The king and the queen are not mirrored from each other. Those are the 2 pieces that are the same as each other, but because you're facing each other, it creates a tension that has to be resolved. There's no chess game, and like chess games can end in stalemate, but that's because somebody made a mistake.
Right.
All games should be resolved, and white should win.
Yeah.
Because they move first.
Yeah.
So if white doesn't win or there's a stalemate, there was a mistake, which is, I think that's interesting too. It's an interesting element of chess that there is a tension built into it that makes the game work.
How do you, if you do or don't, how do you relate this to or not relate this to the idea of the separation of church and state? I don't know if it's mapping at all, but it was kind of reminded me of, because you use this, like the idea of separation of powers type of thing or something like, I don't know. And Christian nationalism comes to mind. I know that these are kind of dangerous waters, but the idea of, maybe the authority being in the church and the power being in the state or something in that way of looking at things again, which I don't know.
That's an interesting question. And I think if you look at the Western Holy Roman Empire and the Eastern Holy Roman Empire, you see how messy it gets, right? Like if Charlemagne, if you have both, then you do whatever you want. But even then, so Charlemagne made himself the emperor and the pope, right? And he still got chastised by the church for the Saxon rebellion, right? So
and that could happen with your company. I imagine that the CEO, even though the assistant kind of has the power, perhaps like that the CEO could still come in or wait, I might have gotten that confused, but one person could come in and say this isn't the way or something, right?
Yeah, well, usually what happens is they'll bring their own. They'll drop, because they come in and they see that structure, and a lot, like if a guy is insecure, he'll fire that lady and bring his own from his last company, or like someone who's been following him through his career. But the problem with that is that she doesn't have the social network to make it happen. So then you get a power struggle. And I've seen this too. You get a power struggle between the old company and the new head of the company, right? And she's part of the head of the company. And then nothing gets done. And then the company falls apart. So anyway, but your question about the church and the state is really interesting, because I do think, I mean, that's the two-headed eagle, the Symphonia, and that's the ideal, but the ideal never works out ideally, right? There's always the church wants to over influence the emperor, and the emperor wants to ignore the church. That's the tension, and I think that's the tension that kind of is built into the chess game too. There's those two sides. Like, I know it's not just between the king and the queen, it's between the two sides of the board.
Kind of reminds me of the left and right brain as well, like maybe the authority or something, like being the right brain, the master coming in and saying how things should go or something, but then like the power to actually do individual tasks being left brain or something. I don't know. Yeah,
no, I would agree with that, because the left brain is very prone to thinking too highly of itself and thinking it has too much power, right? Yeah. And it tries to ignore the right brain and is very enamored with itself, and that can happen in the executive assistant situation, where if they start getting too big, then you'll hear the executive be like, they'll do something to kind of keep that in check, right? But I mean, the best thing your company can have is a humble executive assistant who's also qualified and talented, right? Like, that's the greatest thing. Then your company runs smoothly if that happens. It doesn't matter who they put into place, honestly. It doesn't matter who they put in as the CEO. If you have a good executive assistant, your company is going to be okay.
You're talking about continuity.
Yeah, right. Yeah.
Because the people that they hired, like you talked about the manufacturing versus the fabrication, like not having that continuity of understanding over time, because it's not just a static thing, it's a living organism.
Exactly right.
So that's what creates the health and the mechanistic idea that you can just manufacture, like you were talking about, make widgets out of people, make widgets out of the company, doesn't work. I mean, I see it in healthcare. Oh, we just need another warm body in this place, to do this role. And I mean, there's some things standardization helps, but it's not human.
Well, the best thing and the worst thing that happened to the health industry was getting the industrial engineers involved, right? Like GE did that. GE, for some reason, they ended up with a hospital chain in their portfolio, and they were like, this place is a mess. You guys are disorganized. Everything's confused. And they brought in some industrial engineer guy who's like, oh, well, he just followed people around and started, like rearranging where they put supplies and labeling stuff. And, there was some good to that, and it definitely improved their profitability. But then the guys with Excel got involved, and that was the end of
that's
right? Like where they started trying to measure everything and
optimize
everything, right?
Informaticists now. That
optimization for what?
Profit.
More profits.
For profit.
Yeah.
Where they'd send you home like the day you've had surgery. Like, just go home, it'll be fine. Like, what? Or we can't give you my bed. That costs money. Okay.
Be anti-fragile. Come on. Walk it off.
There is some truth to the that when your body believes it's healing because you're like moving more, that your body does heal more. Like I'm alive. I need to stay alive. But at the same time, that's like a therapy versus the idea of like, let's get him out of here. But they kind of sometimes.
Also, true. I love how we're so in the corner, and like Chezi, and we're so patriarchal about our feminism. Mandy and Cassidy, talk.
I honestly don't even remember why I even originally came in. I don't know.
Hi, Mandy. Thanks for tuning in yesterday.
I will defend the Discord. That's what I was going to do. Defend Discord.
Oh, cool.
That's what I need to do as well.
I love the Discord. And it was like, I joined it in 2019. And that was how I like knew all these people. And then I kind of got left behind because I was kind of afraid of this whole camera thing.
Oh.
Everybody left. Well, not everybody. I still love the Discord, but it used to have a lot more happening than it does now.
Yeah, Lance is a big proponent of that, and Lance has pushed back on me a ton about all of my technological takes, because you need spaces for everybody to meet people where they're at, and everybody's in different places.
Yeah,
like not everybody wants to do this.
Yeah, this is what I was why I decided to join particularly. I was kind of already planning to join, but this was what really sold me, is that when you were talking about, what is the medium that we're looking for, and then eventually the answer that you came to was iconic thinking, right? And what I was thinking there is kind of how like the medium, in some sense, is like the medium through which we are interacting is like our modern left brainism in a way, right? And like that is almost like the message itself, the left brainism that is, in my opinion, kind of the opposite of the iconic thinking in a way. Do you see where I'm going at that? In the sense where, like, what do we need? We don't necessarily need to find the right platform, like in terms of an app or something, but we need the right medium between us, like the medium. What type of language are we using? What type of the medium of our language, right? And we need iconic language and iconic thinking, as opposed to this left brainism. And I think, of course, when we're in person, the right brain is a lot more comfortable, because it's like where it evolved for millions of years, right?
Right.
Like all these other signals. So that's one thing to consider as well, I think. But I think in any medium, it's almost like the meta medium or something is like the type of language and the type of thinking that we have when we're interacting with each other, and something like that.
I think they're if I'm trying to be as honest of an observer as possible around this, why we're like the Discord versus the YouTube, or let's say any other medium. We like YouTube because we get more clicks. And I mean, if that wasn't the case, there's seriously no difference between this and being on Discord. The only difference is this is being broadcast and shared with many others. So it's not just merely clicks. Possibly it's the desire to share with people who, having this desire to share our thoughts with other people because they might glean something from it. I think that's also something we should be honest about, but it's different. I mean, there is virtually no difference between this live stream and sitting in the Discord, other than the big difference actually is we can actually fit more people in Discord, and there are more rooms there. But yeah, we don't get to broadcast.
I think there's a really distinct difference, but I have to go. My mother-in-law is coming in. But there's a very distinct difference with live streams, because there is a performative aspect that doesn't happen in a closed Discord room. And there's so many threads you could pull, but I
agree with that 100%.
Online community and the different levels and the different frames, and I think you need this sometimes as part of it. But then there's all of these different frames, and there's something about taking the online participation and grounding it in the in-person that I'm very interested in, but I can't get into because my mother-in-law does walk in. So I gotta go, guys. I'll talk to you later.
I'll try and carry that torch for you a little bit.
I'll stand for this. Okay, just say she left. I'll stand for this, which is, I mean, this is the case I've been making for a long time, right? Which is to me, what's very obvious, what's happening here with what you're doing, Luke, is that, and I don't disagree, Chad, there's a performative aspect or whatever, but there are other people who don't even want to come on here because it's broadcast live or whatever.
Right.
The reason why people keep wanting to jump in here, Luke, right now is people are hungry for the community. right? They want the communication. This allows the free form aspect of it. This is how TLC creates its body, is when we communicate with each other, right? It's not just like, you can say there people are talking about thinky talky things, but there are a lot of relationships that are being built. And I'll raise my hand. This is my failure. Things have been super busy for me. But when I did something on Grail Country here like 3 months ago saying, hey, would people like something like this that's not publicly broadcast on the internet, I got tons of DMs and everything else. People are like, yes, do that. Like, we want to come together and have conversations. So there are very few places right now, quite frankly, there are hardly any, where people are actually coming together to talk, like what you remember the voice chats were like when you were there, Luke, or whatever. Yeah. And people are very fragmented. They're on Signals. They might be on Voxers. They might have their own little groups. And so I think what you've done here, Luke, is one, I mean, the way you think, people are attracted to that. You spark ideas, and that's the case. And CW is making fun of you that, well, Voxer became too popular because of that. And now you're doing this, and now it's becoming too popular or whatever. He was just kind of joking. But actually, Luke, like, you have a gravitational pull to yourself. You're a charismatic guy. The way you think is very interesting. I think you help people out in that way. So you will always be the sort of person who kind of draws a crowd just because of kind of who you are, and so on and so forth. But what I see that's happening here is these are, and particularly here, like Luke, kind of you went away a little bit. Like, I try to come in to help you administer this or stay in the backside in case you want to jump or whatever, because that's how I'm kind of trying to serve you, right? But I'm also trying to serve the community because people are hungry to have conversation. And so I think these things are important. And so to everyone out there, I'm super busy. We're trying to close out the school year, and I've got a lot of work done. But I will create that space. Probably will be Discord to start, where we'll just have some rooms where people want to have just conversations, and we won't have a bunch of hosting stuff. So if people want to have these spaces, that I want to try and provide that space offline.
Yeah, this year is people. I wouldn't say that people here, except for the maybe 10 people that end up showing up on camera. This year, people aren't hungry for conversation. They're here to listen to conversation. On Discord, that's a different thing. People are hungry for conversation there, and I love both of them because I'm an attention whore. So I like. I like that. So I'm just trying to lay out as honest of a critique of the thing as possible, because it's like, we like, let's just say what it is. Like, we like to show people our face. We like to hear people hear. We like that people are hearing our ideas. We like the comments we get back, whether they're good or bad, and there's a reason for it. It's okay to admit that.
Yeah, that's one aspect of it for sure. And then, but there are also people that want to participate but won't come on here, Chad, right? Too. So there's that aspect.
Yeah, I'm kind of more in that line. It's that where most of the reason I like post YouTube videos is because I'm just trying to add stuff that I resonate with, and I think it might help other people, and it's it's nice, it's affirmative, or but I don't hop in the Discord stuff a lot because I am trying to prioritize in my life like IRL friendships, or just embodied, whatever you want to say. And so I definitely resonate with you there, Chad, that like it's not like part of the reason that we like the YouTube, that some people prefer YouTube, is for this kind of less personal aspect in a way, like not trying to make it about me or make friends, but rather to kind of promote ideas or whatever. And then I also wanted to tag on to the what Hezi said about the visual, because I think that's one other thing that's kind of a difference. Although, of course, like it's not really a difference though, because you can do video calls in Discord and such, but I think that's one reason why this pull is happening, of people being gravitated towards stuff like what Luke is doing, because it adds back in that whole other half of the conversation. Of course, just in general, like people are seeking conversation, but I think particularly the visual aspect, as he mentioned, it's this whole other half that has been kind of ignored in books or in emails. God, I hate emails are the worst, and like and it all just kind of gets flipped back on, and it feels more human or something.
A lot of us grew up on television, and we loved television. We loved television, and like one of the things that many of us probably wanted growing up secretly was that we could actually be on television, and voila, here we are, folks.
I think what was the guy's name earlier? Was it Luke's friend from Australia? He mentioned about Charlie, the fact that we're not watching the same thing. I think YouTube has that edge over Discord of actively we're all the chats on the side. That's where you can be virtually not alone, like you said earlier.
Yeah.
But I do. I guess my question would be more for Luke, Lance, and Chad and Mandy, who've been there for a while and gone through all these different mediums. Which of those mediums? Which of those mediums that you've participated in TLC and fostered the most relational relationships?
Discord.
I feel like if this channel was like, this isn't a knock on the channel, but if it was like huge and there was a ton of people watching, I mean, I would never come on here. It's kind of because I know that it's not, that makes it okay. But like the Discord, even when it was just typing and I never did the video things, even though sometimes I would listen to people talking, like somebody said, like, I don't know, at the beginning of the stream that you're virtually alone if it's typing, but I don't know. Because I like the reason I found the whole Discord was because I was like going through this horrible thing, and it was like there was just people talking to me back and I don't know. I didn't really. It still was a level of not being alone, but
yeah. I want to
jumping into a video chat, but I don't know.
Yeah, I want to be clear in my my berating against textuality. That I still, as I said, it's kind of I do think that ultimately people are just seeking conversation. So like, if people can find an outlet, perhaps that's good. I still think that like maybe it would be better to look for those friends in your local community. However, we all know how hard it is, so the fact that we can all get together and do stuff like this, even if it is just textual, I do think has value in my mind.
It's really hard to find people in real life that are interested in any of this.
Yeah, I think we have to kind of.
Main problem,
I think we like to sweep this under the rug, though, and I think we need to like perhaps make this more of a topic, though. Like we obviously don't just want to all. I think as long as TLC is ultimately kind of aiming at in-person stuff, I think we're good.
Well, and I think that's just, to me, that's just either or thinking, right? Like I know a lot. No offense, John. A lot of people make this case, right? Which is it's all the things, right? Like we've come around Paul because he's a YouTuber. Like we found Paul because of YouTube. Let's don't. So YouTube is, like when you were talking, Luke, YouTube is the primary thing that has brought all of us together.
That's the tradition of TLC that can't be ignored. Yeah,
it will never be ignored. And Paul's still a
question.
YouTuber. But let me finish. But with respect to, there are real relationships that are being built out of us meeting online and talking online.
No, I'm with that, man. I'm with that, but we don't.
Well, let me finish. But then, of course, be embodied in your own life. Like, go to church, get involved in your community, everything else. Like, it's all the things. It's not either or. Like, people denigrate this online thing. I'm like, guys, this is an online community.
Well, hey, I thought that's exactly what I was saying. So I don't know how I'm being.
Yeah, I don't think we're denigrating online.
Yeah, I don't think anyone's denigrating it, Lance.
Like, and here's the thing. Like, I am curious though. Like, let's say if you found somebody in on the ground setting, a pastor who is equally as cool as PBK, would you spend time with him? I don't think you would. I don't think we would.
Yes.
I don't think we would.
No, I'm totally. I hear you. I hear you all, and I think by pointing, what was I going to say? It's that we just have to maybe make sure that we, like you said, it is all of it. It's that if we don't talk about stuff like where can we find friends like this in person, to my mind goes to the possibility of the Matrix, where we spend all of our time in situations like this, so I'm with you. We have to do all of it, But but this stuff, if we're going to participate online, we have to remember that there is kind of this. It's trying to suck us in, you know. That's what I think. At least it's trying to eat us. That's what I think.
I think there's a reality to found time as well. Like the people used to. Radio was one direction, TV was one direction, podcasting was one directional, unidirectional from the people doing it, and then we can actually all podcast when we're listening to podcasts instead. We're doing it right now. We're podcasting instead of listening to podcasts right now. So that's like a progression of the engagement with the technology, with the newfound time, because technology has given us found time, whether that's a dishwasher or that some of our work is automated or all these types of things. And it's like, well, we're in this evolution of engaging with that. I want to go way back because Luke, I guess I don't know if he called me back, called me out, or he was just making observations about some sort of social media profilicity or something with, I don't know how Pete and Christian.
I just don't know how you manage.
Yeah, I wanted to talk.
Like me even being on Twitter and here feels like I would go into a panic.
You were kind of saying like, I mean, I'm not a good Twitterer. I basically just push this stuff over there, and I used it for networking to contact people that were on Twitter to try to say, hey, do you want to have a conversation? So that was like, but I'm not like, no one reads my tweets because I suck at tweeting. Like,
it's so funny. It's so funny.
I also just want to say, like, I was off social media for like in a certain way for 4 years. Like I wasn't even a part of it. But before that, I had, I was trying to build a personal brand as a worship leader in evangelicalism. So this whole game is also not foreign. And then I also want to tag in the reality that a lot of people, because my wife was listening when I was still in my house, and she's like, "You're also an addict,"
mm-hmm.
And and I was like, "Yeah," and I think that's a reality of like how you participate in something that people with addictive, Chad the alcoholics and Lance the alcoholics or whatever, like Christian the addict of certain kinds, and that it's. Part of it is that is a reality. I think we could all probably say that we have addictive tendencies related to this, or whenever something grabbed our attention, like Jess was saying, I think somebody was saying, when something grabbed our attention, like a Jordan Peterson, and then we just were like, for 4 years, everything that came out, this guy that was speaking in the culture for a certain amount of time. So I think there's a lot of pieces of that, but me getting back into social media in the last 3.5 years was after but I've also I don't know if I was kind of doing this performatively or I was kind of doing this as a case study to go from sitting on my couch to then being in my studio. That also part of it is just skill. Part of it is being familiar with the technology, how you interact with it in a certain way. Like, oh no, Christian's in a podcast studio, but I was in my couch, 30 minutes ago because a certain point of my life was spent like using these tools, digital media technology in the Christian church for years, and that it's not new on how to do that. Last point, I was off work for a month, and so everything that happened over the past month with just me putting out conversations is like, I made this work.
You had the space.
I treated it as work. And so in my calendar on iPhone, when I was scheduling Christian Baxter YouTube conversations, I would tag it as work because that's just how I decided to mentally approach it. And I think that's where some of the conversation about mammon and how we use these things and being honest about our intentions, because we can look at somebody sometimes and be like, oh damn, they're like killing it on something, and and it's like Luke, for instance, even though you don't want to make it about things, and there's probably reasons in your life where you don't feel like maybe you have to make something about mammon or money, but the thing that is also a reality is that when you invest your time, which you've invested a lot of your time and your energy, and you get better at something regardless. That's not static. You become a better idea orator, talker, streamer. People are then attracted when the skill actually increases. You're creating a better product of what you're doing. And then the other piece of that is when you put the investment in, and even though you don't want to make it, we look for metrics to validate our investment into things. And so things like subscribers and things like clicks and things like view counts, that's how we want to be validated for the work that we've put into something, whether or not it's right or not. That's how we operate, and pushing back against it in a certain type of way, I think, as being honest about it is very important. But the other side of it is like trying to find recognition for the amount of investment that you've put into something. And I think that that's okay as well. That's just reality.
Christian, I wonder, Christian, how much, because I know how much I love performing music. It was one of the places on earth that I could feel at home. And so I loved being a performer. It helped me feel like a person, you know? And I'm wondering how much of that do you experience? And not like, because it's weird, because you can't necessarily call this performance, but you can't not call it performance too, you know? And so I'm wondering how much of this fulfills the space I'm assuming you don't have a stage to perform on now like you once did. Does this fulfill that?
I mean, I have begun helping lead worship, in the last 6-9 months for the first time in years. But one of the things I felt so misunderstood when I was fired, and then I actually came back to my church that I was fired from after about 6 months, and someone came up to me and said, "Oh, Christian, I hope that you can play guitar again someday." And I felt completely misunderstood. I'm not saying the person was wrong for saying that, but the most pain was that I had been a part of cultivating and building something, and that had invested personal investment into that, because I had cultivated and built a career, helped build a church, cultivated and built skills that were all related to this, and that all went away. And so with this, it's not so much necessarily about the performance. It's about building the whole thing. It's to deny that you're cultivating and building something whenever it is whether it's community, whether it's your skill on how you're approaching the technology and doing this. I got a new microphone. I'm trying to learn how to use this and then he integrates, and it's all building something. And that was the most painful part about that, was that I had helped build something, and unfortunately my part of it wasn't built on enough character to stand on it or over time. But that is to me, versus just versus just the performance aspect of it. My thing, I liked rehearsing sometimes better than I liked performing, because I liked the craft of trying to get something. The performance is 30 minutes. The performance is 45 minutes. That's only a piece of the whole pie. It's the one that everyone sees at a certain point, but everything is something.
I totally agree, because I loved everything about
it. Wants to speak, Chad.
Okay.
Sorry, I need to get going, but I want to say two things.
Chad, come back.
Chad, we had this. Chad and I had a private conversation about this morning, where he apologized to me about yesterday's stream if he came in too hard, and I said, Chad, it's hard because Chad's back is to everything most of the time. And he has lots of things to say, and he's an addict, and so I get it all. Love you, Chad. It's totally fine. I just need to go because I got things I got to do. But so the two things I want to say in closing, kind of in response to what you were talking about, Christian, and then just more broadly, is in regard to technology. Again, it's always Christ and Antichrist, and I want to maintain hierarchy and better and worse, and talk about exceptions and rules while not diminishing any of them. Do I think that audio is better than text? Yes. Do I think video is better than audio? Yes. Do I think in real life is better than the other? Yes. But that doesn't mean you can't have real communion in text. That doesn't mean you can't have real communion in audio. That doesn't mean you should disregard or diminish them or anything. The law is just if you use it lawfully. That's that one point. And then the other thing, part of what I think I'm almost good at or doing or liking, I don't know. Do I have a performative aspect? I don't know. I try really hard not to, and I intentionally almost try to subterfuge myself.
Oh, I'm so sorry, Luke. I'm gonna have to, because I was trying not to come in on this. It's a point I've been trying not to make the lessons since I've been sat at, which is YouTube. I think Chad touched on it. It's reach, it's audience, it's all of this. You add Voxer, you add I forgot the other ones, Discord, all of those things, where you could still do the same thing. Like you said, you were doing the exact same thing on those Voxer channels, but there is this performative contradiction of being on YouTube and saying that you want to become smaller whilst you're still growing. It's like, no, dude, like you will. That's part of it, inevitably.
Yeah. Well, and I need to think about that more in the pushback. But to finish out my thought, and maybe this will make more sense of it, is I almost think what I'm good at follow me as I follow Christ, follow me as I follow Paul. What Paul's really good at is highlighting other people and letting them grow and blossom on their own, and then they start their own things, and then that happens. Because like, look at Christian's killing it. Christian first came into TLC on my stream, and that's great. That's fantastic. You know,
but the other part about that though is that nobody has the works of those people that Paul propagated. Paul's still the one. It's in the Bible.
Huh?
No, it's talking about Paul Vanderklay.
Paul Vanderklay.
Oh, okay. Sorry, I thought you were talking about Paul, the Apostle Paul.
Oh, I was quoting Paul, and then I referenced Paul Vanderklay. Yeah, follow me as I follow Christ, Saint Paul, and then follow me as I follow Paul Vanderklay. Sorry, yeah, that was. But so I don't. And this is the like, because really, it's almost. And the last thing I'll say is using like TLC is the telos of YouTube. It's almost like trampling down the algorithm by the algorithm. What TLC does is uses the algorithm against itself. Like truly, I don't give a shit about status, numbers, anything. I like the engagement. I like the fact that I know you guys. I like person making, people cultivation, highlighting people. And like, yes, does that happen in different forums based on temperament for different reasons? Like maybe introverts like text more. That's all fine. That's all fine. But like this is the medium I choose. And so it just is what it is. You know?
Thanks, Luke.
All right.
I also in the stream realized I was having a complete like tech boomer dork moment where I keep thinking, how can I get in touch with these guys with how do I find their emails? And then I was like, wait, they're probably all on Twitter and I can just DM them. Maybe I should like find my Twitter password, get on there, I guess. I was totally in 90s internet mode. Like, how do I get their email?
I actually found PVK, everyone says on YouTube. I actually found him on Twitter. That's where I first saw the Discord link and joined all that. It wasn't.
Oh, interesting.
Yeah, mostly not working. Found him on Twitter.
I also this is a great topic, I think, because I think I'm like semi savvy, like I'm not looking for emails, but at the same time, it took me a long time. Sorry, Jeremy, but it took me a long time to like actually be like, what the heck is going on here? Like, I like listening to Jordan Peterson, I like listening to PVK, but like the corner was sort of inscrutable, and it kind of took me going to Chino and just being like, I'm just putting down the money and going and flying across the country to see what the heck is going on here, to like realize there was something there going on. So like, it's like there is a barrier to entry, and that's on purpose. It's not meant to be like, I'm consumer. Oh, what's the main Instagram channel? Okay, here's the Instagram. Here's the performer. Here's the audience. There are all these clear roles. You can engage by commenting. You can engage by liking. You can dislike people's comments. But like the corner's purposefully not like that. It's like you gotta, if you really want to participate, you gotta fly to Chino. You got to show your face. You got to be in a discussion, and you have to put your nickel down. And you also have to be willing to like find this stuff. The fact that it's a little hidden is probably good. I mean, you see already they didn't let me in the studio at first because there were too many people. So like once we grow to like, and that's only with 9-10 people, imagine once we get, if things popped off even more. So this is
so some of the nostalgia related to the early internet. I think like the early internet had a high barrier of entry, so the conversations were insanely high quality, right? Like if you look at the old Usenet threads from the 90s, it's amazing. Like the philosophy stuff, I mean, you can't even hardly find it anymore. You can't dig it up, but because Google bought Usenet archives and basically made them impossible to get to. But like watching the early conversations on the internet that were just text-based, and where the speed of the conversation was sometimes 3 or 4 emails in a day that just got archived in conversation threads, the exchange was just very high level. And then even with the early internet, like post Usenet, like I'm speaking as the internet historian, I guess I'm probably the oldest person in the room, and I was on the internet from as early as it was possible in my community, which was like 92, 93. No, not later than that. 94, 93, 94 is when I got on the internet. And
I was born.
You were just there with other nerds who could figure out all of the weird arcane magic you had to do with a modem to be able to get to the internet and talk to each other. And that kept out people who only wanted to have casual conversations about things that were everyday and mundane and boring, right? Like it was just a high level of, and that just, as they made the internet more and more approachable for more and more people, it became normie town, right? Like it just became, they had to weaken, it got weakened by greater participation. And so I agree with you. I think that one of the best things we have going for us is that this is secret and hard to get to, and not everyone, and because it keeps out the people who want to just come in and like who can't participate on the level that we're interested in participating in, right? Like you can't have these conversations every Friday with your local group of friends. They don't give a shit. They don't want to talk about this stuff all the time. They just don't. It's too much.
That goes back to the shared experience, though. When everyone, there was no way that you could listen to a college-educated professor for 200 hours over the course of a year or two. All you had was broadcast television and books and radio. And that was not that long ago. That's the time that you're referencing for the most part. If you got on the internet in the 90s, you could get some of that, but you were still having to read it and you were having to go to it. You couldn't just press play on a podcast and go, or play on a YouTube channel and go. And what that has done is, instead of being able to have substantive water cooler conversations about the Matrix, which was this cool, interesting, esoteric idea, but still, like, you're just like basing that off of what you, and like, oh, well, that was a really meaningful conversation between me and my buddy at work. Now if you've spent 150 hours listening to John Vervaeke, who the hell do you talk to about that? This is a different thing, because when you spend 5 to 7 years listening to a real cognitive science professor, a real clinical and academic psychologist, a real esoteric artist talk for hours and hours, who the hell are you going to talk to about that? Mm-hmm. But they all were, the conversation that they were creating all happened on YouTube. And so people that have been on YouTube for 5 to 7 years or 10 years, that's why it makes sense that this conversation happens on YouTube.
Yeah,
I agree.
Well, just along this thread, and just so we don't lose it, like I'm okay with the TLC growing and all the different people who are fractaling out and then making their own little thing. But I think that if it loses its fundamental shape,
cancer.
Then it's just growth for growth's sake. And so I think that, like, just realizing that, it's awesome that some of the people here might rise and become sort of mini Paul, go on to do greater things than even Paul Vanderklay has done, as Christ says. Some of you will even, but to remember, like, everyone's role is legitimate, even if you're just someone who shows up to these, even if you're more of a lurker character, like, as long as it stays in the correct proportions and shape, like, we can get as big as we want. But if you lose any of those factors, you're really splitting off into this new thing that at worst could be called cancer.
I'm curious to hear
Michael
Michael's thoughts. Michael hasn't said anything yet, and I see he's trying to say something.
Yeah. So, you know, I think it's really interesting, kind of how some of the conversation. I listened to Luke's monologue, and then I kind of skipped a little bit of the early conversation, just so I could catch up. But you know, kind of that Tower of Babel aspect. You know, I've thought about that a lot, and you know, because we have these conversations about Tower of Babel, like in regard to the like technological aspect of it. But you know, the technological aspect of it was only one part of the thing. The main problem was that there was no ability for the bad culture to change because it was so unified. And so you know, I've thought about like why did God do that? Like why was that the thing that he chose to do? And my assumption of it is that it put everybody into places where they would have to be vulnerable. They didn't, no groups or whatever could do everything on their own, but it had made them, it forced them, you know, because you have a difference in language. When you have a difference in language, it forces you to establish your relationship very carefully. And so that trust can grow naturally, you know, because first you have to signal, you see another human being, you know, if you get stranded on an island and there's natives, like the first thing you want them to do is like recognize I'm not an enemy, you know, and then you start maybe like once you get to that, you know, you're dealing with basic necessities, you know, I need water, I need food, you know, and then you can figure out, you know, you point and you point at the thing and you figure out what their word is for the thing that you're talking about, and then you can start to like learn the language and grow. And I think that that the great thing about, you know, what's been going on in this space is that we do have these small steps into things, because you know I can say even for my own path, it was first, it's not really that hard to leave comments or something, and you just kind of maybe expect that they're going to be lost into the void. You posted your comment and nothing happens, but then like, oh, PVK gave me the little heart, or somebody else said, oh, that's a good comment, and then you're like, oh, like I do have something to contribute, like I'm not, you know, cause, and I was even like, when I said part of eventually what this led to me starting my own channel is I can just have the time to just say my full thoughts, put them out there. Nobody's going to interrupt me. Nobody's going to shoot me down, say it's dumb. And then for the most part, if people are not interested, they just ignore it. But the few who like it will respond or whatever. And then, you know, I got into the Discord and started, you know, having some little interactions there. And then eventually the conversations and the whole thing comes up. And, you know, we're like now, you know, it's like I've gotten to meet several people in real life. I've gotten to, you know, have phone conversations with other people's. Luke, you know, I will say he's much more muscly in real life than he looks on the camera. So his camera is at least giving him a little humility.
That's most people don't know. I'm quite a short laddie. You might be surprised.
Yeah. Well, I mean, yeah, we're all the same, you know, 3-inch head on
we all smell the same
on the internet. Yeah. So yeah, you know, I think and you know, I think that's kind of the way that, you know, you always have that thing, you know, if you have a bad unity, eventually it's going to collapse, and then there's a certain devastating thing from that, but that's when you can like pick up the pieces and start over and make it better. And I think the thing that this affords is that probably a lot of people here are like, I didn't succeed massively in the real world or whatever, you know, you weren't the one that was at the head of the class or the, you know, the most popular kid. And now, and like what Jeremy was saying with the early internet, with like the message boards and stuff, it's like the people that didn't get to be popular, and were probably very frustrated by the way things were, they start to build their own system, and it's more compassionate for the people like them. And so, so that's what I think is kind of the process here that's happening. And I think, like PBK is like his camera's better, but it's still the same like content, and like it just so like I wish I went to Bible school and I took some classes in like pastoral ministry. Never did I see a thing of like just the example of Paul just listening to people share their story. But it's like that's the kind of pastors we need in the world. We need that a million times more than we need good sermons,
Ooh,
so,
preach, brother.
Yeah. So it's kind of this thing and by doing it in public like this, what we're allowing people to see. And so then, like people are following a path, like right now, my brother's become a lurker. So he's been, so he'll tell me about, did you watch this video and things like that. And, hopefully eventually he'll want to get in and start leaving comments and maybe eventually jump in a stream or whatever. But, so it looks like good organic growth to me, the way things are happening.
Hey, Nathan, you jumped on. It's been forever. What brought you into the live stream?
I just happened to be off today. I've been watching a bit more recently. I'll do a quick intro because I think Lance is probably the only person I've actually talked to before. So I think I started following PVK in 2017, end of 2016. At the time, I was looking at Christianity. I wasn't raised in a Christian home. My mom was what she calls a recovering Catholic and was pretty against organized religion. I got into some pretty new age occult practices for a long time. But I stumbled upon PVK soon after Jordan Peterson, and I was interested in Peterson. I'm really attracted to compelling speakers. He didn't really say a whole lot that was rewiring my brain or anything, but whenever I started hearing PVK talk about him, I was like, oh, this is because I was trying to figure out Christianity because I'd never really given it a fair shake. I was getting a little older. Anyway, so I was following PVK. I had a conversation with PVK, I think in 2018, 2019, which was never published. It was pretty spicy. And right around 2019, I got pretty involved in the Discord server. I was very involved, especially during after 2019 went into 2020. Everything was locked down. And while all that was happening, I was in the process of inquiring into the Orthodox Church, which I'm now a member of. And on top of that, at the time, whenever I was starting to watch PVK, I was returning as an adult student to get a degree in English and digital media. So I was reading a lot about, stuff Marshall McLuhan adjacent, thinking about digital technology. And 2019, 2020, I came into the church, and then I would say, that was that summer I met my wife through the Discord server. I'm one of the handful of people that got married through the Discord server. That was kind of, in my mind, kind of like the heyday. I was pretty active in the voice and text channels. I have a lot of thoughts. I've really appreciated all you guys, not just today talking about this stuff, but recently. I feel like we've entered into a new phase of the YouTube side of things. The one piece I want to highlight real quick, and then I'll let someone else jump in. One of the more interesting conversations that PVK had fairly recently, and when I say recently, I mean like the last couple of years, was when he had Dr. Jim talking about Westerns. Do you remember that? Okay. The idea of a generative story and how so many of our stories today are so sterile. The guy gets the girl and, they become dinks, or like and as opposed to, I forget which Western he highlights, but the cowboy, the sheriff gets the girl at the end, and it's kind of implied that they're going off. They're going to start a family. Like it's, it's actually passing down the generations.
Yeah.
And
now we just everything's multiverse, which has no connection to real life.
Yeah.
No, I think that's exactly right. But what I see, real quick, I'm wrapping up here. But what I see the YouTube as is at this point is it's like the engine that propels. Just call it the conversation doesn't do it justice, but this sort of communion, this digital communion that we're having. I know the Discord isn't as active as it was, but for me, like you have that engine and I'm going to mix metaphors here. We have the engine, which is YouTube, which is propelling the main thrust of things, but then you have the Discord server. There's some other channels as well, but the Discord, it's more hidden. It allows for a kind of community that scales a little better. I mean, we are talking about the pro-felicity aspect. I think as modern people, some degree of narcissism is kind of required to be a healthy human being. Not healthy, to be a productive human being. And I don't think that's great, but I think that's how it is. So the Discord for me, what has been so interesting about that is that it has generated, I've had Jacob over to our house.
Yeah.
I've met other people. My wife and I, Shelly, we have 2 babies. Other babies are coming.
They met on the Discord server, people.
Sherry actually set us up. But all that to say is that this is like the real deal. I know don't want to pat ourselves on the back too much. It's not like any one of us are doing anything special. But this really could be the cutting edge of, how people slowly start to reestablish, just the basic patterns that have existed for all human existence. So
I think that's beautiful. I love that. I really appreciate you coming in to say that, especially the generativity part, the idea that it can go further. I think that's great.
Thanks, man.
Yeah. Nice to meet you as well.
Yeah. Cheers.
And Lance, hopefully that was clear when we were when I was responding to you earlier that okay.
Yeah, and Luke did it. It's all real. It's all valuable. This is just as invaluable as in real life stuff because it is in real life, right? But I get we all need our embodied places and spaces. For me, it's 12 steps groups, it's church, it's family, it's all the things. I'm very blessed to have a lot of. I'm very, very blessed to have a family first and foremost. I'm very blessed to have a deep wisdom group within 12-step recovery that provides me a ton of ways to work out my life and serve people. And then very blessed that I'm a part of a church, right? So I have, and then I also have a job where I'm leading people. So there's a lot.
Yeah, and that's what you said before is this proportionality, right? I think that's key. What you said there.
So I'm just you guys continue the conversation. I'm going to drop in the background. So great to see you, Nathan.
I was going to make a point about Nathan. Nice to meet you.
It's nice to see you guys.
Nice to see you, Jonathan. I was going to make a point on just this idea of growth in the Discord and YouTube from my experience of coming in kind of cold turkey related to the relational aspect of TLC. And there in my experience with trying to establish a culture, like an embodied culture at a modern church plant within a community, and I think one of the things that's a big lesson from how they were prolific. They were prolific when these churches set up a campus that is feeding the pastor's sermons to the screen across the state, and they are maintaining a very distinct culture. It's not that much different from like when people talk about it is and it isn't. So please take this with a grain of salt. From maintaining a historical preservation of the divine liturgy, they're doing the same thing, only that it's been created recently. This culture that a church, and it's centered around a bishop that then has bishop, and that then has these prolific campuses, and they're able to replicate a culture very, 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 very well. And related to this, and is there a better way, or is there a more healthy way versus like a cancer growth and slow growth versus fast growth and all that kind of stuff? When I'm hearing like the Discord thing, I had been on Discord once, like 7-8 years ago, to play a video game with my brother and his college buddies. We were playing that soccer game with the race cars on Xbox. I don't know, can't remember what it's called. And the thing, so I didn't know how to use it. But as I've seen like how Grim uses his Discord, and someone said Discord's like the Roots. I definitely think that what I see in that is a type of niched down community development. And so when I've been thinking like, should I start my own Discord? Are people going to think that, oh, Chris, look at this dude, he thinks he's hot shit, he's starting a Discord, what the hell does he think he's doing? But what I see, and I think the way Grim runs it, he's a leader. He's running it as a leader, and people follow him as a leader. And I was looking at that, and people like, or the question, well, how do you defeat the Dunbar principle, and how do you where it's healthy? It's like we have to quit being mad when somebody else this is something that's inside of me, when a spirit within a competitive spirit within inside of me, being having a non-rivalrous attitude towards things, where to say, do I believe, or can I believe that I embody some kind of what we would call the spirit of the TLC? And am I, maybe I'm not worthy to take and create another community, but how around a person, which is what Paul Vanderklay is, which is what Grim Grizz is. And there's a community around these people, and try to continue to press down the communities out with this, with almost an anti-growth idea. Because Alan said recently on a Paul Vanderklay live stream that Paul was talking about trying to do more podcasts, or not, and less, and he was doing randos like for the first 3 months of this year. He just was trying to unload this backlog of randos that he'd given his Calendly, and he was asking if he should keep doing this. And Alan, Corner Citizen, said, if for no other reason than, for example, because it challenges the idea to always and only seek status in what you're doing. But at the same time, you shouldn't not have a conversation with somebody you think's interesting if there's an opportunity that avails itself, because, oh no, that's status seeking. It's the ability to see them as a person, and to see these people as a person, and to not see people as opportunities, is to see them as people. And I think that's part of the great power of, and when I say power, I don't know, I think it's powerful that has been a model within this. And I've been challenged by it to continue to practice that model in my attempts to establish some kind of thing called like a podcast in this space. And so I think that there's just a lot at play there, but there's a reality to culture replication or culture preservation. And I think people see that in Orthodoxy, but you see the quick and rapid replication in something like the modern church plant. And then asking those kind of questions of like, hey, well, how does this grow, or how does this spread, is asking a similar question. There's a lot there. Sorry, just going.
That was all great. I don't know how to respond. That's great.
Well, I could say, because I spent so much, most of my life in evangelicalism, and finding it like mostly a good place. And like I said, it could be the odds that I happen to be in all good churches. But there definitely, I definitely did see a big problem, like, because I spent a few years at like a big mega church, like discipleship program, and they really had there was definitely a big gap between like the celebrity level success, and they were trying to like bring up the regular people to be the leaders, the next generation of leaders, but there was just too much of a gap between, the middle point of it. So, I think there's still so much strength in that model, that can plant churches fast and stuff, but it's like I think there's a sweet spot that hasn't quite been discovered between like the slow, healthy growth, the natural equipping of new leaders, and versus the the alternative of like having to build a cathedral and a monastery before you can go and reach the lost. Sure. So so I think that's that's part of the thing. Like,
I'm just curious, Michael, did that mega church, did they use a lot of like high tech stuff? Not high tech, but like.
Yeah, they had I've been to a bunch, or working several, and the big one that I was at for about for 2 years in Illinois, like it was like 5,000 person church, whatever. They had all this stuff. It was before like streaming, really, but they had like 3 cameras set up, and they put with different angles and all that stuff. So yeah.
So for me, I've become convinced that that I'm sure you've heard the idea of the medium is the message, and for me, digital technology by its very nature is it's not meant to replicate in the same way that, let's say, the printing press did. It's much more. It's harder to contain. It's more mercurial. It's heterogeneous. It's not a homogenizing medium. So you're gonna, the more you rely upon digital technology to establish is probably pretty good at, to continue a culture or a tradition over, 10 years from now, God knows what digital technology is going to look like. Like, we're not going to be doing this. We might do some version of this, but it's going to be different. So,
I think the technology stuff, like, I think the bigger problem that I see is, and I had mentioned this on another stream or whatever, because like a lot of this modern stuff, it came out of the like, the kind of like the Jesus people, the hippies coming into the church. And I think that was a good thing, because that was a thing where they were redeeming the culture that they were familiar with, the types of music and all that stuff. But then that just got turned into the and it was important then, because that was like, I guess you could say it actually was like the cultural zeitgeist, because it's like young people would be finding the music that had the thing that was speaking to them, and it could just as easily have been music that contained a Christian message or a psychedelic drug message, but they were both, there was actually innovation like happening in both streams at that time. And then at a certain point, like modern churches all went to this default thing of basically just aping whatever was popular in the moment. And I think what they should do is, or what I think will eventually explode is if a church or whatever figures out what is the culture, what is the current culture like lacking, and create, you know, like an actual artistic the new thing, like be the, if the church is the innovative thing, then it will explode in a good healthy way, you know, because that's like what you have with like you know, like because the Reformation, what it brought in musically through like the hymns and everything, like that was huge, you know. And it's like you have Bach, he's like the greatest composer of all time, you know. He was a Lutheran, and so he probably wouldn't have had Bach if you hadn't had Luther first, you know. So but yeah, we're just, but it doesn't work when the church is just letting the culture of the world dictate everything, and then they're just copying it. That never works.
Right. Yep. Hi, Sherry.
Hi, Nathan.
I was telling my origins story for all the people that I didn't know, which is most everyone I jumped on.
Really? I'll have to go back and watch. I just
Well,
jumped on.
I mentioned it because you were part of the story.
Yeah.
Alex, are you new around here?
Well, yes, I am, and I found you guys through PVK as well. I've been watching videos on YouTube for quite a while, and it's as a matter of fact, before I started watching videos on YouTube, I was basically watching Netflix and Prime, and before that, cable. And the reason why I'm watching not mainstream stuff anymore is because, well, I'm a father. I have kids, and as my kids get older, they begin to have all these ideas which are mainstream, and I have to take it upon myself to detach from that, to not get hooked on that, to not get, I guess for the lack of better word, to get addicted to these entertainment, which is in excess. Excess. Anyway, so I'm beginning to make sure I ground my kids into reality of sanity, because I don't think that word is even used anymore. I grew up in the 90s, and I think part of society is starting to wake up to the nonsense, to the way society is going, and where truth is no longer truth, and 2 + 2 no longer makes 4, and even this is being taught in universities. So I've been detaching from all the entertainment, even so. Anyways, I'm just trying to find genuine people, genuine truth, and that actually are not allergic to Christianity. Don't get offended when Christ is mentioned or what it is to be a Christian. And I came out of the Catholic Church. So when I was growing up, I went to mass here and there. I wasn't really like head over heels. I never was at that time. And when I became a parent, me and my wife we wanted our kids to be Christian. And when we're trying to see what we're going to teach them, it turns out I didn't know anything about the Gospels, about what's in the book of Corinthians and Galatians, Thessalonians. I didn't know anything. And we could keep going. And so that's when we started to change. You know, that's when we started to seek different churches that were Christian. And we did find one that has been feeding us. And then, anyways, I don't want to make this long story longer than it has to be, but so I'm trying not to fall into the same trap that I've been caught up since I was a kid, as far as easy, what did it call it? Low hanging fruit, right? Mainstream, whatever society says that's popular. Oh, I guess that's where I got to be at. I'm trying not to go that route anymore. I'm trying to find people that are grounded in sanity and common sense, and Christianity, And you know what? It's hard to find people, even though YouTube has a lot of people on there. It's not as easy as it sounds.
Mm-hmm. No.
Well, welcome.
Thanks for sharing.
Welcome, dude.
Well,
welcome
thank
to
you.
the,
I appreciate
the
it.
next level.
I don't know if we're
Yeah.
sane, but we keep coming together trying to figure it out, I think.
It's probably
It's
not a good idea to question your own sanity.
No, I wrote a play about that in high school, actually. I wrote a one-act play where a guy had a nervous breakdown, goes to the mental hospital, because we still had those back then. Goes in them, checks himself in, ends up in a room with a serial killer, and they start discussing what it means to be insane and what is insanity. And it, at the very end, I'll reveal, I'll spoil it for you, because no one's ever gonna read my play. But at the very end, the serial killer turns out to be the psychiatrist, and the psychiatrist has successfully like spun this guy out, and you know, the orderlies come in and open the door and hand him a clipboard, and he walks out. Right. So yeah, I was interested in that idea from very early, like, and I didn't realize it was like a big topic of discussion in postmodernism, the whole idea of what it means to be sane and what is sanity. And it's very much a social definition that changes over time. You know, it's definitely a live definition. It's a very interesting topic.
Well, I mean, you know, I think this speaks directly to the complexity of what it means to be a person, because we all have elements of, you know, some diagnosis in us. You just go through the diagnostic manual, you're like, oh wait, no, I'm all of them. And that's why I said it's probably not a good idea to, you know, question your own sanity, because I think it would actually make you go insane to a certain degree.
Well, I guess this is the point where I didn't want to mention my personal life, but actually my day job is I'm a nurse. I've been a nurse for some time, and I've been working in a psychiatric hospital for over, it's going to be 6 years this July.
Cool.
So part of my world does involve being right smack in the middle of crazy delusional ideas, and how people go from, because not everything's hereditary, and that's where the providers try to make the distinction, because they have to determine how to treat each individual, and some are hereditary, and it's kind of like the luck of the draw, I suppose, right? If you have schizophrenia, you know, there's no cure for schizophrenia, but there's people that have been productive even though they have schizophrenia, and there's other.
Nice to meet you, Alex.
Yeah, there's other conditions that are. Oh, hi. There's other conditions that that are not hereditary, and that's how it seems like normal people get captured by whatever kind of. There's so many ways people can go sideways over time, and one of those is dealing with stress and dealing with other people's judgments or with our own thoughts, because no one's perfect, and sometimes our conscience, especially if we can't break that cycle, will just get the best of us, and before you know, we end up having a mental breakdown. But anyways, I didn't want to mention all that kind of stuff, because that's, you know, I don't know, that's not too many people like to have those kind of discussions, because that's a touchy subject when you talk about what people might consider normal and other people not normal. And like I said, that term sanity, we don't use that term in that psychiatric hospital. As a matter of fact, I haven't heard that in a long time.
Is that because it's hard to define?
Well, it's been redefined. It's no longer the DSM-5 that they use to diagnose. It's that term has been scrubbed out. It no longer lives in the literature.
What lives there instead? Because something always takes its place.
Well, here's the kicker. I mentioned so I mentioned hereditary and one that's not hereditary. So they have two different labels. One is axis 1 and the other one's axis 2.
Okay.
Axis 1 is the one that there's no cure, like bipolar or schizophrenia. Axis
Mhm.
2 are the personality disorders, where it's not by hereditary, multiple reasons, and you can become more normal if you want to. The hard part is very few of us ever want to improve,
Yeah,
because
yeah.
nobody wants to acknowledge our own shortcomings, because
Mhm.
that's part of the pride aspect. And that, I guess that aspect goes way back to 1,000 years from the initial fall, where pride, it all begins with pride and not trusting in the Lord. So the truth versus the, did God really say that? Right? Someone tries to question what normal is. Really? Is that really normal? Because the whole world thinks that's not normal anymore.
Yeah,
So
I mean,
yeah.
When I think there's at least a couple of times when Jesus encounters a sick person, he asks them if they want to be well.
Right.
And I encountered that because I went through my own mental health difficulties, and I encountered that in many places, like just the fact that people didn't really want to be well. They somehow their identity had become attached to their mental illness, and they were, I suppose they probably couldn't even imagine who they were outside of that. And but I found it baffling, because I'm the kind of person that's like, okay, I got a problem, I got to fix it. I got to get in there, I got to figure out how to make, get myself on track. This is just personally, like, not every problem out there, but my own personal issues, I'm very I'm just, that's how I'm motivated. I'm motivated to be a better person most of the time. At least I try to be. I don't want to sound like I'm perfect, but and so I remember sitting in some mental health classes, because I took a bunch of them. I took everything I could find, through the local agency here. And there was at all times, there was maybe two people, me and someone else in the class, who were really, really making the effort to do the work, ask the questions, figure it out. You could just tell. And I actually spoke to the facilitator of the courses and said to her, am I just seeing things? Because of course, when you're mentally ill, you don't trust anything that you see. And I'm like,
that was your first step toward healing right there.
Yeah. I'm like, am I seeing things, or does nobody here really want to get better? She goes, oh no, you're not seeing things.
Well, I'm wondering as well about health, if this is the right term, like healthy bipolar versus unhealthy bipolar, because like I was talking with Michael the other day about autism and a bunch of other things, and I'm wondering if some of these classifications will sound more like extroverted versus introverted, as opposed, like, as far as people on the spectrum, right? You could have someone on the spectrum who is healthy and someone who is unhealthy.
Correct.
And so you might identify everything that identifies this person as being on the spectrum as being debilitating, but it's really because that person is unhealthy and not because this aspect of them. Like I have a friend, and she's extroverted and extremely anxious. And so what a lot of people think is her extroversion is actually her anxiety. And people don't realize it, because she just keeps on talking, and you think it's because she's extroverted. It's not because she's extroverted. It's because
she's
she's
just
unhealthy.
trying to cope with her anxiety. Yeah, I get that.
Yeah.
Now,
Sorry,
there's one thing I am going to mention, because the providers, people have to meet a certain criteria, or else they don't get that label, because that nobody wants to be labeled, because that label sticks around forever. And so they don't, at least some providers don't want to go willy-nilly on that. But aside from that, the one thing that I did learn that I couldn't get enough of is when I was trying to learn about the personality aspect. Because remember, I'm flawed. I got my own issues, and especially before when I was rejecting when God was trying to call me, and I was like, no, thank you. I'm doing my own thing. I'm too busy. So like I said, I got my own issues. There is this, it's called the Big Factor 5, and there's an acronym, OCEAN, OCEAN, and that entails basically humanity and people,
right?
And where you are at on each aspect. And I think Jordan Peterson mentions this several times in his videos. The extroversion, openness, and all that stuff.
Yeah.
And if you want to, and this doesn't really have, I shouldn't say this, because, well, before I say this, I want to be cautious because I want to be a Christian first. So my identity has to go out the window, right? Everything I learned from when I was a kid has to go out the window, and I have to put on Christ's righteousness, right? I'm supposed to be this, right? I'm supposed to, when I went under the water, that was my old man. I'm a new creation in Christ. So, like Paul says, he tries to mimic Christ, mimic me, trying to mimic Christ, and man, trying to be like Paul, trying to be like Christ. That's a tall order. But anyways, I want to say that first because I know that my identity I should be mimicking Christ. But when it comes to my human nature, if I want to improve, because if I want to love my neighbor, my family, the stranger, that is a Christian thing to do. And how do I know when I'm not, right? If I'm limited in my knowledge, if I have biases and blind spots. Yeah. So the OCEAN, the Big Factor 5, has helped me to see where I am, why. I guess it helps me see my flaws more clearly because part of my vanity,
or a way of saying
pride,
it is your natural vices and virtues. It would
right.
show
my fallen nature,
what your easy temptations would be.
Could
be lined up with how
and,
neurotic, how all
and your strengths. I think that's
That's why I said virtues as well, vices and virtues.
Virtues, yes.
And sometimes it's easy virtue, like it's easy for you to do certain things, and understanding
and other
what
stuff.
those...
I have to work really hard to improve those, but I don't know I need improving until somebody points it out. And usually when somebody points it out, I take it, but
like it still has to be healthy. It still has to be healthy within that. So an example that I use when trying to explain this to people is that one of Spider-Man's superpowers is that he's neurotic. That's what Spider Sense is. Spider Sense is that all of a sudden he is completely aware of everything that can go wrong and that's going wrong in any situation. That's neuroticism. It's one of his superpowers.
What about intuition?
That's right. But when he's first transforming, or in some of the stories it becomes too much, it's like having a panic attack. It's too much information, too much going wrong all the time. Sherry, I feel like there was something you wanted to say before.
Yeah, just because Sam joined, and he joined before we started talking about this, and I just wanted to be sure that we're on track with why Sam joined, or if he had something else to say.
Yeah, because there is clearly the easy vices of the extroverts in the room.
Yeah.
Oh, I appreciate that. Yeah, I'm just kind of working along, and I'm trying to practice less lurking, more participation.
Awesome.
Since I saw the room was small. Also, I mean, just some thoughts I had. If you're asking me to talk, I will talk.
Yes, talk, Sam.
Maybe kind of weaving together some of these themes here, both if you want to call it mental health or whatever the language is, and then the idea that was started with of kind of ring of power, the stuff that the medium is the message. what is this
Bombadil.
technology? Bombadil. How is it dropping? Like, how is it shaping how we are actually being formed? And I think one of the questions to consider is how is it shaping our actual mental health? I happen to work in the space of basically human-computer interaction. So I'm thinking about these questions a lot, and we have a fun saying that we kind of aped from architecture, where first you shape your tools, then your tools shape you. And been considering a lot of the ways that GUI, graphical user interface, sort of turns you into, it's engaging your eyes and your ears, for instance, and it's shaping you in a way, especially the more you use it. I've noticed in my own personal life, I got into this kind of work because I thought, oh, a desk job, I'll be able to, I don't want to be overly strange or anything like that. And unfortunately, compared to my, 55-year-old father-in-law who's worked construction his whole life, or carpentry, and just had a hip replacement, he's in much better physical shape than I am. And because there's a corresponding impact on your health, both physical and mental, depending on the way that you supplement with these tools. And so I'm just sort of trying to consider, as Luke was asking, well, is Discord or YouTube or there's a variety of ways of engaging with these things. What would a more wholesome, whole health, creating interaction or technology be at who knows, like we've said, in 10 years, who knows what we'll be doing. But I guess that question's on my mind. And I don't have good answers right now. But.
Well, places like this will survive because not many people know about it. And when the enemy doesn't know about it or doesn't think it's a big deal, they won't try to shut it down. And I was watching another YouTube, and they were mentioning where these technologies and AI and the YouTube, how even though YouTube is not Christian people are using it for good when the enemy has been using it for bad. And it just seems like these places are going to survive because they're not mainstream. Big channels do get canceled the minute they hear something they don't like, then they are plugged. But small places, not so much.
I just wanted to address these two comments because I've been watching the conversation between Junior and Mark. So he says, with wisdom comes confusion. Wisdom evaporates confusion. Okay. And I think they're both true, actually. There is a verse in scripture that says, much wisdom brings much sorrow. And I know from my own experience in life, I've had that experience when you know something. And I think wisdom is, I mean, this is not a general, I don't want to generalize this, but I think there's there's an aspect to wisdom that is like, it's not necessarily something you want.
Well, and it also isn't rational, which I think is where Junior might be coming from, right? Because to me, this seems like a little bit of a younger person versus an older person's view of wisdom.
It totally is.
And when you're younger and learning, just being introduced to wisdom and learning about wisdom, you're like, this doesn't make any sense because it's not rational necessarily, right? It doesn't mean it's irrational. It just means it's kind of supra-rational and or meta-rational. And I think Mark may have had more experience with the clarity that comes from moving beyond rationality. Whereas when you're first being introduced to wisdom, it can be very confusing because it does not fit your intuition necessarily, or it doesn't fit your rationality. It doesn't fit your rational way of looking at the world.
Well, I think when you get older, you get more comfortable with being in an irrational place.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
Whereas when you're younger, it's not. Yeah. Go ahead.
The Bob Dylan song,
my back pages, where the chorus says, he's going through all of his idealistic things of what he thought the world was like, and then he says, "I was so much older then. I'm younger than that now."
Yes.
So if when you think you understand the whole world, you're the most confused. So and that's why there's always that thing of the wisest person or whatever in the book of Proverbs is the one that most readily identifies himself as the fool or ignorant, or I would definitely say I don't know. I know there's a whole lot more things that I don't know hardly anything about than I
Yeah.
used to think.
Yeah, that's why I said, you're more comfortable with, I don't know what I said there, but I'm thinking like ambiguity, lack of clarity. Whereas when you're younger, and I'm only speaking from my own experience, is, you really desire that kind of certainty, because, well, I suppose experience teaches you that even if you make a wrong move, these things seem to work themselves out in the end, thanks to what Alex was talking about, personality, right? Because I don't know, like in my life, when I look back over my life, I see this golden thread that runs right through it. That's kind of been, I wrote a poem actually about it once, about the fine line that we walk upon. When we look down on it, it is there and then gone. Oh, how I weary of the light that shines, making it thick once, making it fine. As the one foot falls right after the other, the line swerves around and draws itself under. So like you have this sense that even in your foolishness, you're still being carried, right? And that's something that you can only see in retrospect. So
but that is a form of therapy now. Narrative therapy is a form of therapy because, again, that sense of health that comes with everything that you're saying. One of the ways of thinking of being a healthier person is being able to see that, because you could hit a lot of despair if you had all of those same events occurring and no ability to see it as the story that you're seeing it. If it's not a redemptive narrative, then all those things could be terrifying.
Yeah, and I'm just thinking, David, because I keep saying in these live streams, we got to realize the story that we're in. We have to realize the story that we're in. I'm just like, come on, people, wake up.
Yeah.
And it's probably because of that, like because of like the poem just says it for me, right? Like I'm not, I can't say it any other way. And I realized that I'm actually in a story and I'm being carried by it, and it's one of I just get the sense that I'm being loved.
Mm-hmm.
Right. That's why I use the term carry. Like, I'm not thrown about, not blown about, but I'm carried by it. And
you are in the process of sanctification, I think is
amen.
what Paul says.
Yeah, that's right. Yeah.
And they do say that hindsight is 20/20. How is it that hindsight always has perfect vision, right? Why is it that we can't see that that's not going to turn out, that's going to bite me? But I can only see that once it already happens. And I think that's what maybe what God was trying to say, lean on on your own understanding. And because he hopes that you don't have to learn the hard lesson of, that's why I told you not to go that route. But hindsight is always 20/20. And when we look back, if you want to know who you are, you just have to look at who you have been, right? And be honest about it. And that tells you, because we had at least I had the perspective when I was young, and I'm still trying to grow up, that this is hard. Sorry, this is personal, but when you look back, you finally see who you have been, because
That's right.
I used to have this delusion of who I thought I was, and lo and behold, I was just an idiot all along.
I think
I've been a fool.
Yeah.
And it's not until I was honest enough to see, like, wait a minute. And that's why I think Jesus is so important, because he proves to you that that's why we need a savior, because if me on my own, I'm just an idiot.
I've realized that some of that is exactly what so many of my arguments early on in my marriage have been, is that what happens is one person brings up, because of one action taken, that says, I'm actually completely wrong about what you're like, and maybe you're actually like this one incident that just occurred. And now I want to talk to you about whether or not this is who you are, as opposed to this other person that I thought that you were. That, like, we are arguing over what kind of person you actually are, especially when you're first with someone. And that's part of our own spiritual growth, is like a realization of, like, wait a second, if I keep doing this, then what kind of a person am I? Am I wrong about who I think I am?
You know, it's interesting because I think that, like, if you in that context, David, that you're talking about, like in relationship to your spouse or whatever, or a close friend or family member even, you tend to project onto them something that you want, right? Because your ego's still living in that really toddler stage where it just wants things, right? And it thinks that if it can have something, then it will be happier. Because unfortunately, in that toddler stage, we know deep down somewhere that we're not really fulfilled, right? Which I like to flip around as filled full, so it's like,
yeah, sorry, go ahead.
Well, it's just that, that's where you wish something on someone, right? Like, and then they struggle to be the thing that you're wishing for, and the whole thing gets really difficult.
I think about this as a lover of stories, that there's I like watching, remember DVDs, everyone, the deleted scenes, and some of the deleted scenes really ruin the movies. And someone had to sit down with the writer of that story and tell the writer of that story, you don't know what's actually good about this movie. And so if you include this, you just ruined everything. Right? And like that I wrote a play that was basically a documentary. It's difficult to explain. And if you look at how documentarians are listed at the beginning or end of their films, is the documentarian is listed as the writer of the movie. And that's crazy, because what their writing process is knowing what to include and what to exclude. They didn't make anyone say anything, but their role of choosing what gets remembered and what gets put forward makes it
because
so
that's
that
the editing process, and because you get to focus on what's important, and you have to omit some stuff that might give a different implication. So I see why they would do that. And
I want to give a shout out to Verna Fields. Verna Fields was the editor of Jaws, and Jaws turned out to be a completely different movie than what they set out to make, because the Jaws mechanism was broken. Like, they couldn't get it to work right, and it didn't show up on camera. They shot over 300,000 feet of film. Actually, it was more. It was like they shot like 800,000 feet of film, and the actual edit ended up being 60,000 feet. So Verna Fields was the one who made Jaws, right? Spielberg was in the field trying to shoot and edit. I mean, trying to shoot and direct the actors and trying to make a story out of a machine that wasn't working on film. It just looked terrible. And Verna Fields is the one who made that film. Like, she won that film won Best Editing for that year, and she's the reason why we know about Jaws. Like, the editing is the hidden author, right? Editing is it's what makes a movie. Just for what you said, when you're too tied into the daily, the director is there on set, so he knows the context of the performance, but the editor is the one who's in a separate room, not on set, who just sees what's on the film who actually builds the story. And they have that distance that enables them to be able to make those hard decisions, because the director also has to work with the actors day by day. And if they're seeing stuff that's not working, I mean, that's the director's job, is to get a good performance on film, and then let the editor put it together in a way that tells a story. But that emotional distance is some of the strength of the editor. It's not a weakness, because they're the ones who actually have to put it together and make a story.
That's
just
really
quick, because I'm gonna mute myself in a minute. I'm expecting a phone call, but I just wanted to say before we float too far away from this, when I was talking about wishing things on people, it has everything to do with this right here, trying to grasp the future and bring it down into the present, right? Like when you put on to somebody what you wish they would be, what you want because it needs to fulfill your needs, or what you think you need because you actually don't know what you need. You're doing that. You're grasping the future and bringing it down into the present. And that's why, to me, like Jesus just keeps pointing us into the present, right? And saying, don't go there, because that's going to cause you a whole world of pain. But anyway, I'm here, but I'm expecting a phone call, so I'm just going to mute myself.
Well, I was going to bring up, so I know the Kenneth Bailey video, PDK's talked about him before, and there's another guy, Peter Williams, who just wrote a book about the surprising genius of Jesus is what it's called. But like when he takes like Jesus telling that parable of the prodigal son, and there's like so many references to specific, like the lines that he's saying are like exact quotes from specific stories in Genesis. And basically it's like the Pharisees are saying, why are you spending all this time with sinners? And then he basically just tells that story, and it's like an edit of the whole book of Genesis, where he highlights basically all the redemptive elements that they had ignored in favor of, maybe the more punitive aspects of what happens. And, that's, so it's definitely that ability of, it's the salience landscape thing. You can, and we can do it with our own life. How you choose to look at your own past, and I think, because the thing with the 20, hindsight being 20/20 is true, but then the further you go into the future, well, you only fully see in 20/20, like at the end of your story, or it becomes more and more clear, and like I think probably a big aspect of that is, how differently do you view your parents once you become a father? Like it recasts your whole history and puts it into a different perspective. So yeah, but that's probably all I got. So I'm gonna go drive off now, but it was great to talk with everybody.
Well, becoming a parent, that had a big change in my life, because what I thought was important ended up being not so important, and the things that I thought I needed to learn, well, it was a different thing. And anyways, it's different. And my kids are getting older. My oldest one just turned 15, so they're not kids anymore. And I'm still, I can relate a lot. It's different. I see my parents in a different light than when I was a kid, right? Because when I was a kid, they didn't understand, right? And now that I'm a parent, I'm hoping that they understand me, but it's just ironic how this whole cycle repeats itself. And you wish the best for your kids, and you try to ground them in as much of reality and in truth and in Christianity. And when you're a kid, life is different. Things are important in the now and pleasure and things, and right. And that's not Christianity in a sense. When you're a kid, nothing really. I mean, it's like you're innocent. It's not that you're doing it because of evil or anything. It's just that you're a kid. You don't know anything. You just, why can't I eat ice cream all the time? You know what I mean? The kid, there's nothing wrong with that. So being a parent, man, that's a huge paradigm shift, I guess. And then becoming a Christian, that's another huge paradigm shift, because you get introduced to a whole new reality and a whole new different way of seeing things. And yeah, that's just a big, I don't know, it's hard to describe what being a Christian is all about.
I think it's interesting because when you have little kids, you shape them. And then when they become teenagers, they shape you. Like they actually start pointing out all your flaws.
Yeah, I have 3 daughters. So I learned how left-brained I was by having daughters, right? And how rational, and how I tried to reason everybody. And if everybody could just understand my reasoning, then they would see things the way I do. And that's just not how it works at all, right? So daughters really opened me up to a whole different side of seeing the world. And to my shame, I didn't give their way of seeing the world a lot of credit in the beginning because it wasn't rational, right? I had the Enlightenment ideals of everything needing to be rational and reason, and that's our best way of seeing the world. And it just, when you have daughters, you find out that that's not how it is for half the population. And I'm not denigrating it. I didn't trust it, and it took me a long time. You know, I've been married for 22 years, and it took me most of that to begin to trust that other way of seeing the world.
I think this narrative conversation is very important, because the way that I would describe your daughters if I was writing your story is as a foil. Right?
Yeah, for sure.
But if we are going to take this idea and try to bring it into our own lives, to actually say that to ourselves, this is like, if I could see a possible story arc for myself, this character is that I'm interacting with right now is a foil presenting me with an opportunity for growth in this story that I'm in. Right?
Yeah. Well, and I heard someone, it was a while back, but I saw a video. It was really interesting. And it was talking about like the different levels of engagement that an audience can have with a work of art. Right. And he was talking about how, if you are presented like with a movie and it's got the music and it's overwhelming and it's got the story and it's huge, it's, you know, this huge screen and it's dark, and it's like the ideal position for presenting a story, versus like a black and white manga or a comic book, or like the comics and the Sunday, you know, and the Sunday cartoons, where it was like, he was talking about the difference between how much audience involvement there is. And he was making the point that like movies are trying to hijack that with being so overwhelming, but he said there's a different way of engaging the audience by letting them bring their own experience and fill in all of the gaps that you're leaving, right? Like he said, when you're looking at a black and white hand-drawn comic book, you're bringing the color, you're bringing the sound, you're bringing the music, and there's this higher level of engagement. And he said, so you're imposing more of your own experience and your own background into the story, which is a higher level. And what I realized from that, my takeaway was that that's how I had approached a lot of my relationships. I had a relationship that started online, and I had built this whole model of who I thought this person was through my online interactions with them, but it was on an IRC channel. It was just text communication. Then we met in person, and it was like, it was disorienting, and ultimately the relationship failed because I had built up an image of who I thought this person was, and then when I was presented with the real person, I didn't recognize them, and that is defined what ruined the challenges I've had to overcome in my relationships, is that I build this big image of who I think they should be or are, or who they really are. I can see the real difference, or I can see the real truth, and it's just all delusion.
Well, I'm wondering as well, a role that music might play in everything that you're describing. When you're watching a film, soundtrack often has so much to do with what the tone of the piece that you're watching is. And we, on a daily basis now, can't just turn on a radio and I'm sorry, you're stuck with whatever you get. We're actually on a regular basis. The music we're exposed to is like a soundtrack that we're creating for our own lives. That is just like, this is the tone of the kind of person I am, right? Like when I was in high school and I was very dark and all this other stuff, like I listened to punk rock and emo and like I created a soundtrack, and it wasn't a very positive soundtrack because like I interpreted my film a particular way, and this was the kind of music that belongs there.
I'm gonna take that concept one step further. When it comes to music and how music or the score changes the feel or the impression or the communication without words that a certain scene is trying to convey, we have that inner music that affects us, whether we like to admit it or not, in a positive way or in a negative way. And it's something that we sometimes don't realize what's happening. And I'm going to say this as the inner music, so to speak, as a metaphor. Pessimism, or the opposite of being a pessimist, optimist. Too much pessimism, like that sound, right? Like a horror movie has a different music than a comedy, right? And it changes the feel of it. That inner voice, the inner turmoil that is brought about from too much of anything, too much pessimism, too much optimism.
You look at this. You look at the stories that people were interested in when punk rock and emo and everything were at their most, were at their highest. Is like if you take something like Zack Snyder's Superman as just a really quick example. The thing that was ridiculous about Superman was not the shade of blue and red that his tights were. Somehow you're going to make this character realistic because they're a darker shade of blue. It's like, no, there's nothing more or less realistic about the color, but we actually associated at that time, and it's starting to wane now, we associated darkness as being more realistic. If it's brutal and pessimistic, then it's real. And if it's optimistic, it's stupid.
Yeah, that's like a manifestation of brutalism,
right?
But in film rather than in architecture, right?
Yeah.
Yeah. No.
Yeah, because Batman can be optimistic. That's remember.
Yeah, watch the Christopher Reeve Batman is amazing, right? Superman or Superman. I mean, the Christopher Reeve Superman is not at all the Zack Snyder Superman.
And I wouldn't say that one is more realistic than the other, but this notion of tone is the idea. Like the stories have infected us to such a certain extent that pessimism and like as outgrowth of nihilism became an idea of saying, oh, I'm just being realistic. You're not being realistic. You're being a pessimist. Those are different things, right?
Right.
I've had that argument before.
I will say this though. We need just like we need water to survive, right? We can't survive more than 4 days. You're gone already, right? So we need water. We also know that too much water, like in those contests, like if you drink 4 gallons within a few hours, that's too much. You'll get water intoxication. And even those, we need it to stay alive. Too much of anything will ruin us, right? If I'm too optimistic, then I'm going to be gullible. And then the con man will do, I'll be robbed left and right. I'll be deceived, right? If I'm going to be in a new relationship or whatever, I'm just not going to see what I need to see because I'm too optimistic. Now, on the other hand, if I'm too pessimistic, then I'm never going to be able to trust anybody, right? Never going to be able to fully care about anyone because I'm never going to be able to be vulnerable, never going to be able to share, never going to be able to trust them, never going to have intimacy because when there's no trust, when there's too much pessimism, so we kind of need both. Because if you're not, like I said, if you're not pessimistic enough, you will be had, right? You'll be taken advantage of.
Yeah.
Well, within the church, you definitely see this as like
the
people where everything happens for a reason. Everything happens for a reason. Those people oftentimes fall away because of the problem of pain. Because if
Right.
everything happens for a reason and now someone I love has cancer, what the hell is the meaning behind? Like, there's no room for chaos or any of that stuff. If everything happens for a reason, then that's as debilitating as nothing happens for a reason.
That's the trust factor. We're supposed to trust in the Lord, and that's so pessimistic. You're never going to be able to trust.
And schizophrenia as well, where, well, this happened and this happened, those things must be related. It's like, no, those narrative threads are actually completely unrelated. I'm sorry.
No, you're right.
Yeah.
There was a Russian fairy tale I just read recently that was kind of talking about that, how we have this weird desire to try to define or to describe causality, but basically there was a rooster and a hen who wanted some nuts out of the tree. I think they were hazelnuts, whatever, it doesn't, or chestnuts, and or hazelnuts, and so the rooster goes up in the tree and he grabs a nut and he throws it down into the hen's eye, and the hen is like, why and the hen is crying, saying this little rhyme, and there's a peasant walking by, and he asks the hen, "Hey, why are you crying?" And she said, "The rooster threw the nut in my eye." And he asked the rooster, "Why did you throw the nut in your eye?" And he said, "Well, because the hazel tree tore my pants." And so he asked the hazel tree, "Why did you tear his pants?" He said, "Because the goat ate my bark." And he goes to the goats, he goes, "Why did you eat the bark of the tree?" And they said, "Because the farmer woman won't feed us pancakes." And he goes to the farmer woman and says, Why didn't you feed the goats pancakes?" And she said, "Because the what was it? There's some ingredient for the pancakes wasn't available. I can't remember what it was." And he goes to that ingredient and goes, "Why weren't you available?" And he said, "Because the sheep didn't do what they were supposed to do." And he goes and why didn't the sheep do what they were supposed to do? "Because the wolf ate them." And he goes to the wolf and he goes, "Why did you eat the sheep?" And the wolf says, "Because I was hungry and God told me to eat the sheep." Right? It was like this long line of weird causality that's not intuitive at all. And you can't identify the beginning, and ultimately it does point at everything is connected, but you have no idea how.
The woman who you gave me gave me the fruit, and I ate it.
Right. And
So
ultimately it is God saying you do this, but
Yeah.
we can't see that. We can't see God's hand moving in things because it's too complex. We live in a weird, complex craziness. That's why I think causality, like our belief in causality, is an illusion. I don't think we
trying to give that advice to a friend of mine. He started dating and got engaged to the wrong woman. And when he was dating this woman, all of his friends were like, and including me, "You shouldn't be doing this." And then he gets engaged. We all said he shouldn't be doing this. And then he was coming to the conclusion, I shouldn't have done this. Like 2 months before the marriage, I'm talking to him, and he said, "But why would God do this?"
No.
Is there a proverb about the fool raging in his heart and saying, "Why God?" or something to that effect?
Yeah. Yeah, it was one of the most incredible interactions. And that was a perfect example, actually, of someone who couldn't see the narrative thread that they were being exposed to. But this is one of the things that, for people of wisdom, we also can learn from the lessons of other people's mistakes, right?
Right. That's a lot easier.
Yeah.
That's a lot easier. Yeah.
I wish I could have just learned from other people's mistakes and not have to have learned from my own. Wouldn't that have been great?
Yeah. A proverb for better clarity. The foolishness of a person ruins his way, and his heart rages against the Lord. Oh, he's
that
like,
sounds painfully
don't quote
familiar.
Proverbs to me. He's gone.
Wow, he left. You offended him. He couldn't take it anymore.
I'm going to be a little more optimistic. Maybe the battery died. Or lack of connection, the Wi-Fi.
I know that proverb just because it is too familiar. It's my own experience. So it resonated when I read it. One thing I was thinking.
The life experiences. One thing that I realized. as far as learning from trying to find out where all my flaws, like just how many more do I have left to discover? How many more flaws do I have to improve on, right? One of the things that I did notice that a lot of people, which included myself, that I do, and I'm trying to do less of, is faulty expectations. Faulty expectations leads to great frustration, right? And I'll give you an example. When I was a new nurse, I've been a nurse for over 11 years, but when I was a new nurse, I was too optimistic, right? Oh, I'm just gonna hit the ground running, and I'm gonna get everything done, and I'm gonna do, I'm gonna knock it out of the park. And then reality set in, and boy, oh boy, things just came up left and right, and I was supposed to be gonna do all these things within the first hour, and lo and behold, I did not even accomplish not even a quarter of what I was going to accomplish, supposedly, right? My faulty expectations. And I was so upset and so frustrated. Then it dawned on me, I'm not accounting for all the hiccups. I'm not accounting for all the unexpected things that do come up. Once I started changing my perspective, okay, within the first hour, I'm hoping that I get at least these 3 things done, right? These must do things in the first hour. And then I accounted for all these hiccups and things that were unplanned. And then I wasn't so frustrated. So I'll go back to the present as far as faulty expectations. It seems like when I'm engaging with my family, my friends, my spouse, my kids, it's like, oh, we're going to have a nice, productive conversation until you make a mistake or until you say something that's way out there, right? And then I'm going to get upset and I'm going to start screaming. And see, that's another faulty expectation that I've had. And I'm trying to minimize, because what am I saying with those actions? Unless you're perfect, things are not going to be pleasant. We're not going to have a nice conversation with the people that I care about the most. Unless you're perfect, that's insanity. I mean, that's just crazy thinking. But that has been my expectation for who knows how long. I have these arguments with my wife when it was just supposed to be a conversation, an enjoyable conversation. And so it's really hard to undo, to give everybody grace, just like we've been given tons of grace, right? Patience with the long suffering, all the stuff that the spirit of the gift of the Lord, right? Slow to speak, right? Patient, long suffering, right? Humility, all that stuff. And it's like, I'm doing the opposite, right? And it's ruining my relationship with the people I care about the most. And it's really hard to undo all that stuff. To be thinking, unless you're perfect.
Well, I'm wondering the role that the narrative has in forgiveness itself.
Right.
Because like I've come to the conclusion that the book of Genesis is one book. Like people used to have this idea that it's just a bunch of stories all thrown together kind of a thing. And I think that's just absolute bupkis. And that I think the Joseph story is basically also the first story. The first story being like, is you get to Cain and Abel. So you have the idea of, okay, the seed of the woman and the seed of the serpent. And there's going to be this battle between them. And then immediately what happens is I think Cain is actually the seed of the serpent. Because that language which is used where it says sin is at your door and its desire is for you, it doesn't necessarily mean that it wants to eat you. It might want to do something else with you. That's its desire at the door. So you're going to go outside and it's going to have its way with you. And then the thing that's born, that's going to be something completely different. And Cain lets sin have its way with him. And it gives birth to death, the death of Cain. So it basically introduces the story is this bit of chaos. How could good possibly occur if this is what the world is like? And the answer is Joseph, where you are righteous among all of that betrayal, but God actually weaved that story into his plan for redemption. not for destruction. So Joseph's ability to forgive his brothers is because of that narrative. He believes and sees that narrative. And so he says that he's able to forgive his brothers because he realizes that that was all part of the story that God was using to bring about good. Outside of that story, no forgiveness.
And that, like I said, that's why, like I said, without Christ, I mean, he gives us the Holy Spirit so that we're able to see what we need to see, right? If we walk in light, we're not gonna stumble, right? It's when we walk in darkness that we stumble. It's when we ignore the Holy Spirit that we get into trouble, right? It's when we ignore him, right? When we're supposed to be denying ourselves, right? And it's when we're supposed to be the temple where God resides, and we're not, you know what I mean? So we're supposed to allow him to give us that sight, that perfect vision, right? So that we're able to see things in advance so we don't offend, so we represent Christ properly.
I want to give a little bit of pushback, though. I think part of it is believing in the story that we haven't seen yet, right? That's Christ in the garden. Is he never gets to see where it is going to go. He has to believe that it will, and just kind of says, "Is there any other way? Like, could this story be a different way? If it could, I'd really like it. If this wasn't the case."
Right,
But
and he had to go to the cross because there was no other way, right?
Right, and I don't think he lacked intuition or the spirit as such that he, like that was where he should have asked. Oh no, let me better understand.
I wasn't talking about Christ lacking the spirit. I'm saying me, like I'm a person in need of redemption, that needs the blood of Christ, right? Because I am by default gonna go the wrong way, right? I am gonna lose my cool, lose my patience, see things the wrong way, right? Overthink it. You name it. I'm gonna do it, right? I'm gonna do the opposite of what God wants me to do. And it's when I start to deny myself, when I start to listen to the Holy Spirit, when I start to see things the way he sees things, is when I'm able to have patience, when I'm able to listen, when I'm able to keep on listening, even when someone makes a mistake, right? That I'm able to be slow to anger, to forgive. It's when I'm actually listening, when I'm actually denying myself, when I actually have the Holy Spirit ruling over me, instead of my ego, my vanity, my evil desires calling the shots, right? Because can't have two masters, right? Either my sinful nature is my master and tells me what to do, or the Holy Spirit tells me what to do. I can't serve two masters, and like I said, it does. Having that insight that the Holy Spirit gives you, all the stuff that Jesus has taught us, it does help. If you want to have better relationships, it's not easy. Picking up your cross is not easy. Right? Denying yourself is not easy. But with God, even the impossible is possible. And I think that's a miracle where before it was an impossibility, right? I'm an ignorant man. It's impossible, but with him, all things are possible.
Okay, I'm going to run. Thanks, guys.
All right. Good conversation. I don't know if anyone wants to follow up on
that. Sure. I was forget where we were talking about. We were talking about causality, and sort of the rational movement from A to B to Z, et cetera, et cetera. And run into that similar kind of challenge in my own life. Had to go through my own kind of mental health journeys to sort of break the categories and open my mind to see that I guess it was sort of an accessing of the other side of the brain that Ian McGilchrist talks about in a way that I never had before, which and what I've started to realize working in a kind of corporate setting, sort of similar to what you're saying, Jeremy, about the difference between a manufacturing or a fabricating setting, there's all these like weird corporate or kind of capitalist sort of ideas that are just sort of floating around in the water, and it's always fun to sort of note them and sort of see what's happening. And it's especially the left brain, it's especially left brained. So there's a probabilistic, like a lot of like online internet kind of business gurus or like leadership gurus will point to sort of the probabilistic approach to solving problems, or like, oh, there's a pretty good chance if you do this, then this will turn out this way. And that's sort of like, it's like it's like hinting at a sort of wisdom. It's like you've seen principles of things applying in the world, and there's like application that can be made through that. But I guess I'm just sort of learning how to recognize when those probabilistic frames aren't really the right mode to operate in.
You mentioned some good things, and I'm gonna touch on something, because you did mention the left brain logic, linear thinking, right? Equations, algorithms, all that stuff where it's all logic based, right? And you have the right, whereas creativity, there's no, right? You have to think outside the box. You have to incorporate something that's not even relatable. So you think until you make the connection. Like, holy smokes, I would never even know those two were connected in some weird way. Emotions, right? Right brain, emotions, and intuition sometimes like are not even found in the same hemisphere as logic and linear thinking and right structure and algorithm. That's why you have some of these high IQ people in the tech world that are very, very extremely expert in certain disciplines, and they are terrible with money, or they're terrible with in their relationships. Maybe they're on their fifth marriage, and it's because they lack access to the other hemisphere, right, where they don't pick up the verbal cues, the body language cues from the person that they're dating, or from the person they just married, right? They want to have a good relationship with their spouse, but they just don't have the same access, or maybe they ignore emotions, they ignore all that stuff. Maybe they don't want to see it. I don't know. I don't know what it is. Maybe it's a combination of both. But wisdom, in my opinion, because I could be wrong. In my opinion, wisdom, it's that and more. It's more than just logic and numbers and linear and concrete and organization. And it's more than the emotions and how other people, right? Because sometimes people say the meanest things to their spouse, right? And it's like, wait a minute, that's the last thing you want to do, right? Right? You just got married. Why would you want to ruin your relationship, right? When you don't know how that's gonna hurt the person you love. So wisdom is beyond the logical, beyond the emotional, beyond logic and intuition. It's more like okay, sorry about this, but it's more like supernatural. That's why they say that the beginning of wisdom is the fear of God, because God is and has the ability to do supernatural things outside of our intuition, what we would imagine. And I'm going to use normal Dave vernacular, I guess, for high tech. So forgive me for this idea, but if we were to say God is so powerful that he has these new technologies, right? Where we have rewind the clock 100 years ago. Let's go back 200 years ago or 300 years ago, where we didn't have electricity, we didn't have gas engines or the diesel engine, right? We didn't have the internet, we didn't have Wi-Fi, we didn't have Bluetooth, we didn't have video. But now we understand these technologies where before it was unimaginable, right? People say, no, that's magic. They wouldn't even think it's possible. But our technology, our science has advanced that even Wi-Fi, which is invisible, we can see it. I don't have to understand how Wi-Fi works to be able to use the Wi-Fi. I don't have to understand how the so the software language that uses the iPhone app or the Android app right? How it works, how the little components and transistors or whatever, how that works. I don't have to know how it works to use this modern technology, which a few hundred years ago would have been science fiction or even magic, right? When we think about God, he's been around for the longest time. And I know I don't want to say science or technology, but if he was to have, because he has power that we can't comprehend, but if he was to have, if we were to relate it to something that we can relate to human, something we can relate to, something human power, then we would have to mimic, okay, God is too far, I can't understand him, but maybe I can understand maybe a civilization has been around for 10,000 more years than our current civilization. What would that person be like, right? Well, where would their philosophy be 10,000 years from now? Where would that technology? We didn't even have Wi-Fi or the internet or smartphones 400 years ago. Not even the airplane, right? So how would we be able to understand people from 10,000 years into the future? And they're just regular people. Forget about a supernatural entity, or I don't want to say supernatural, but God, which is above our normal, right? This is way outside the box, right? We don't, you see what I mean? It's like wisdom.
Yeah.
That's why I said, in my opinion, wisdom incorporates a lot more than just the logical, the linear, the organization, the left brain, and the emotional, and the love, and all that stuff. It's all that and so much more. At least that's my opinion. And I could be wrong.
No, I agree. I think this is a move in our culture toward risk aversion. And that sounds weird, but I'll tie it together. When my dad was working in the oil industry, there was no, like, you didn't have to wear a hard hat. You didn't, they didn't care if you wore a long sleeve shirt. They didn't care if you wore safety glasses. They didn't care if you wore gloves. All of that was your personal choice, right? You could do it. You're not, there was a bit of a culture of like, if you did, you're kind of weak, but there was just this culture of like, whatever you want to do is fine, but this is the work we need to get done it done as fast as possible, and we'll pay you really well. And as he progressed, even in his career, he just said, he's like, if you want to make any change in your company, just tell them that it's a safety issue, and because what happened was the companies became more and more risk averse because the penalties for the risk became higher and higher as the government got involved, regulation got involved.
We have more to lose. Yeah.
Yeah. And so they started slowing everything way down. And my dad was used to that go culture. And as he got later in his career, he was actually really frustrated because he couldn't get anything done because of all the safety things and safety this and safety that they had to get involved in. Everything, all these other considerations came online, and all these other requirements came online, and we have to make sure everybody has safety glasses and they all have gloves on and they're all wearing long sleeve shirts, and for him
now,
it was like
nobody gets offended,
right? And people took personal responsibility for it before, and then later on that responsibility was abdicated up to a higher level, up to the safety guy and up to the corporation. So people have been abdicating their personal responsibility, handing it over to higher levels of hierarchy and institutions. And the thing about institutions is that, well, and so as a result of becoming risk averse, we want everything to be more certain and more predictable, right? So to me, this is all part of the move toward femininity in our culture. And I don't mean femininity in a negative way. I just mean as a characteristic of a way of looking at the world, right?
Yeah.
And our culture in the West has become much more feminized than it was even just 50 years ago. And we see that even in sperm count, right? Like, and you see it in obesity levels, right? Like, I mean, in every aspect, we've become more feminine. And as a result,
give it 20 years.
We want things to be more predictable. So even though our culture has moved toward femininity, we still have our masculine tools. So we pull out Microsoft Excel and we start doing math and we start trying to predict things, right? And that's sorcery. Sorcery, that's what divination was, right? Yeah. That's what sorcery is. So sorcery is, trying to predict the future, trying to predict what you should do by checking the stars. Well, now it's trying to predict the future by checking the charts, right? I make charts for a living, and it drives me crazy sometimes how much people rely on them, Right.
Isn't there a story where King David, when he starts counting his soldiers, kind of he gets in trouble for doing that?
Yes, it's trying to
It's
measure everything.
What you shouldn't be doing that. And then with
Right.
Gideon, I think is a story about where so the Lord is trying to make a point where it's like, no, how about less of you? No, how about less, right? Where they're drinking from the water fountain or the water well, and God's.
You're kind of cutting out, Alex.
Yeah, we lost you, man.
We lost you. But yeah, there's definitely the first person in the Bible who tried to measure everything and survey everything, the one who like started trying to draw the boundaries for land was a descendant of Cain, right? It's that spirit of like trying to measure everything and account for everything, you know, and it's the too much light, right? It's almost like as we push further into becoming a more feminine culture, we lean more and more on the tools of our left brain, right? It's like we're becoming like, I don't even know. It's like very broken, very separated people because we're pushing too far in both directions, right? We you know, even within our own individuality, right? Like even our own person, right? Like I work in a desk job and I chose it because I saw what my dad's career did to his physical body. And I was like, oh, I don't want to end up all broken. Well, now I'm all broken because because I sit too much, right? And I eat too much. Right. So it's like I did the same move. And at the same time, I work in Excel for a living. I use Microsoft Excel. I make the reports for our company, right? Like I'm doing the same thing. I'm like an embodied version of what's happening in our culture. And it's very broken, you know, and it's only through becoming Christian again and re-entering that space that I'm being healed and I'm being able to be reconciled. And both of those sides have a positive side as well, and they have a way of manifesting that can be unified. And that's what I'm being led to, is reunifying those two different disparate aspects of myself that have pushed so far away into the wrong direction.
Yeah, I feel like a big sense of like maybe what's tying some of these things together is the notion of authority, or sort of a lot of it is masculine, feminine in certain regards too. I sense in my own marriage, for instance, on that micro kind of level, if I abdicate authority, if I kind of neglect to rise up and to take just lovingly serve my family in a way where I'm thinking more for their needs and serving their needs, my wife's not going to let things fall apart. She's going to just step up and she's going to take care of things, and she's going to make those decisions. And it's so easy for me to just allow that to sort of continue until it becomes a pattern. And in order to impart in my own story, it's like my father's father was a town kind of drunk, and he didn't really get that sort of masculine leadership from him. And so then he did a great job compared to his dad. But in terms of just learning how to express that masculine form of authority, there's a priest named Father Hans who talks a lot about men learn from other men. In order to develop that, you need other men in front of you who can, and even beside you, who can help guide you in that, and how to use that and grow in that wisely. I think in our culture, like you mentioned, there's been an acceleration of feminism, I think in part due to the world wars, which we lost a lot of guys for one, and for two, a lot of them who came back were so massively scarred and traumatized in ways that they didn't really even have the language to address. And that's on top of the fact that it's the world wars that's happening in a time when we've in the West when we were disenchanted. We were living in a secular age.
Which was greatly accelerated by the world wars, right?
Right.
I mean, that's what led to existentialism, right?
And it was the Great Depression too. So there was an economic, not just the war, the violence, but also the economic factor, because there was Great Depression, and before that the stock market crash, which people, it was complicated times, and it has. I mean, the world has changed. God remains the same.
Right. Yeah. And I I think the question that I'm facing, at least in my generation, I talk to some older guys in certain, I don't know, spaces, whatever, and they're focused on the politics, or they're saying like things are just falling apart. It's like, it's kind of like it's not fatalistic, but it's just like seeing how things were and now seeing how things are and being like, oh, things are so bad. I really get the sense, for one, that we are shifting into a new world, as it were. And so being prepared to take on the levels of like responsibility and leadership that will be required in this new world is
yes. I agree. If the world is going by the wayside, we have to be more responsible on an individual level, right? I can't change my neighbor, even if I wanted to, right? I'm going to try, but that's as much as I can do. But I can be more receptive to the Holy Spirit. I can be more responsible. I can be able to be more fruitful, right? He wants us to produce fruit. Because, society, all you have to do is watch the news, right? News in Canada, news in Britain, Ireland. They're not becoming more Christian, they're becoming less Christian. And that's globally. So, as they become less Christians, it's up to the Christian to be more more firm of what it is to be a Christian, more what it is that what we're here for, right? What does it mean? What does a Christian look like in a fallen world? Which the world has always been fallen, I guess. But
yeah, well, I think some of that move that's going on in Europe, I think they really took their Christianity for granted, and they assumed, and I think they had the liberal worldview of like, well, if we just spread liberalism, then everyone will start acting like us. And it's just it's come home to roost, literally, in a lot of the European countries where those people have come, people from other cultures, other religions, especially Islam, have come into a Christian culture and showed all of the weak exploits of a Christian culture. That's not when you start bringing people in who have a completely, like, an orthogonal view of looking at the world. And I think that's part of what's waking up, Richard Dawkins to the cultural Christianity. I want to live in a Christian nation, because he didn't realize that what he took for granted as just like common sense morality is not common sense morality. It's Christian morality, which is anything but common sense. And now he's encountering a more pagan, more masculine, more more might makes right worldview, and he's like, oh, maybe this Christianity stuff, there's something to it, right?
These philosophers did think they were going to improve the world. They really, I honestly do believe that they were going to improve the world by making the world less Christian. They're like, oh, that's old fashioned. I honestly do think that they genuinely thought they were going to improve the world.
Oh,
with
yeah.
their philosophy, with their ideas. And we're seeing that, they're starting to admit it. This is not improvement. This is not improvement. This is not.
Right.
This is not.
Unfortunately, now I have to go. This has been a pleasure. It's nice to meet you, Alex. Nice to meet you, Sam.
Yeah, same.
Me too.
And thank you for allowing me to share my ideas too. And
No, I'm glad you're here. It's cool.
Thank you.
Oh, and Lance is coming in. Lance, I just want to say really quick, I'm glad that everything's okay, man. Houston, I saw some photos last night that were crazy. So
it was nuts. It just kind of a straight line wind came through and caused right through the core of Houston. So anyway, we were fine on the south side. So anyway, I was just keeping this open for you fellas to keep the conversation going. So it sounds like we're ready to wrap it up. So thanks again to Luke for kicking off the conversation, and all you guys for joining in Grail Country and Luke Thompson's channel.
And thank you for allowing me. This is the first time I ever joined, because I've always been, watching videos from different, and first time I actually, I guess, dare to join in. So thank you for the opportunity.
Yeah, it was amazing. Keep coming back, Alex. It was great to see you. Good to see you, Sam.
Bye now.
Thank you.
Bless the Lord, O my soul. O Lord my God, you are very great. You are clothed with splendor and majesty. Covering yourself with the light as with a garment, stretching out the heavens like a tent. He lays the beams of his chambers on the waters. He makes the clouds his chariot. He rides on the wings of the wind. He makes his messengers winds, and his ministers a flaming fire. He set the earth on its foundations, so that it should never be moved. You covered it with the deep as with a garment. The water stood above the mountains. At your rebuke they fled. At the sound of your thunder they took to flight. The mountains rose, the valleys sank down to the place where you appointed for them. You set a boundary that they may not pass, so that they might not again cover the earth. You make springs gush forth in the valleys. They flow between the hills. They give drink to every beast of the field. The wild donkeys quench their thirst. Beside them the birds of the heavens dwell. They sing among the branches. From your lofty abode you water the mountains. The earth is satisfied with the fruit of your work. You cause the grass to grow for the livestock, and plants for man to cultivate, that he may bring forth food from the earth, and wine to gladden the heart of man, oil to make his face shine, and bread to strengthen man's heart. The trees of the Lord are watered abundantly, the cedars of Lebanon that he planted. In them the birds build their nests. The stork has her home in the fir trees. The high mountains are for the wild goats. The rocks are a refuge for the rock badgers. You made the moon to mark the seasons. The sun knows its time for setting. You made darkness, and it is night, for all the beasts of the forest creep about. The young lions roar for their prey, seeking their food from God. When the sun rises, they steal away and lie down in their dens. Man goes to his work and to his labor until the evening. O Lord, how manifold are your works! In wisdom you have made them all. The earth is full of your creatures. Here's the sea, great and wide, which teems with creatures innumerable, living things both small and great. There go the ships and Leviathan, which you formed to play in it. These all look to you, to give them their food in due season. When you give it to them, they gather it up. When you open your hand, they are filled with good things. When you hide your face, they are dismayed. When you take away their breath, they die and return to their dust. When you send forth your spirit, they are created, and you renew the face of the ground. May the glory of the Lord endure forever. May the Lord rejoice in his works. Who looks on the earth and it trembles, who touches the mountains and they smoke. I will sing to the Lord as long as I live. I will sing praise to my God while I have being. May my meditations be pleasing to him, for I rejoice in the Lord. Let sinners be consumed from the earth, and let the wicked be no more. Bless the Lord, O my soul. Praise the Lord.